There it goes. Welcome back to Wordy Wednesdays. Yep, it's a Wednesday. It's Wordy. Let's go. I'm your intrepid narrator, host, Fragath, and today we will be reading through more of 40,000 in Gehenna by one C.J. Cherryh. So last time we had hard confirmation that Union be playing games, yo. And basically set up the Gehenna colony to fail, deliberately, in order to slow down and act kind of like a landmine, or maybe something less explosive than a landmine, something to inhibit and sap the resources of the Merchanter Alliance when they start spreading outward. Now, I've bracketed quite a large portion of reading that is going to cover a fairly sizable number of images. I may be being overly ambitious, given that it is something on the order of 70-odd pages, but we'll see what we can do. It would dovetail nicely, and then I would just split the next chunk in half, since that's just one long chapter. More or less uninterrupted after the beginning, I think. Actually, there's a bunch of mini time skips that go on in there, but it's practically a book on its own when we get to it. We're not that far. Anyway, so they've been set up to fail. We've already had a bunch of born man deaths that have occurred. We are, however, I think skipping ahead another 20 years? When was the last time skip at? 31, 2, 3. That's right. Lose the page. We skip ahead from Colony Reckoning year 22 to Colony Reckoning year 58. So about a 35, 36 year time skip. Within this next chapter, we're going to have several more. When I anybody who listened through the particularly the latter two books of the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy will be familiar with numerous time skips occurring. These, however, are delineated with family trees, which I should really double check if I got a hold of. I believe I did. Let me just make sure. Let me find where they're at. Yes, I do have them. Yes. Okay. Alright, so you'll get to enjoy those as we go through. I really should have set this up as a slideshow or a series of slideshows. It occurs to me. I can do that right now. Give me a sec. A fly-by-night operation this most certainly is. Sorry. Alright, I'm looking for number 373-1. There's that. Coming. No, not that one. Misclicked. This could take me a minute. This is very easy if I don't misclick repeatedly. Alright, so that'll be good for now. I'll have to edit this in like 10 pages, but we'll get there. There we go. it looks like it actually cropped that a bit. Sorry, that's going to be difficult to read, but that is actually how it's aligned in my book as well. So, did I? Yes, I did. Okay. Oh, in my copy, it's like inserted really randomly in between some pages, so I'll just flip ahead to that. Okay, so we've got the new map up for Gehenna Stickside in CR 58, Colony Reckoning Year 58. We notice that the first thing we'll notice, of course, is that the mounds, the swirly things, those have expanded further. They are on both sides of the river still, but in a considerable degree. I forget what the dots represent. I don't... It might be marshes or grassland. We also see that Gehenna base is reduced by a square, and that we now have a settlement for the Hillers. Those are the major changes. Slightly changed topography immediately north and east of the Gehenna base. There were some hills there, and there are fewer of them now as the Caliban mounds mount up. All right. So with that, let's get rocking and rolling here with the body lists. Part 6, Re-entry. Military personnel. Oh, this is in Colony Reckoning Year 58. Military personnel. Colonel James A. Kahn, Governor General, died Year 3, Colony Reckoning. Captain Ada P. Beaumont, Lieutenant Governor, died Year of Founding. Major Peter T. Gallin, Personnel, died 34, Colony Reckoning. Master Sergeant Ilya V. Burdett, Corps of Engineers, died in 23 CR. Corporal Antonia M. Cole, under Burdett, died in 32 CR. Specialist Martin H. Anderson died in 22 CR. Specialist Emily Contrin died in 31 Colony Reckoning. Specialist Danton X. Norris died in 22 Colony Reckoning. Master Sergeant Danielle L. Emberton of Tactical Ops died in 22 CR. Specialist Lewiston W. Rogers died in 22 CR. Specialist Hamill N. Massou died in 22 CR. Specialist Grigory R. Tamerlin died in 22 CR. Master Sergeant Pavlos D. M. Bilas, Maintenance, died in 34 CR. Specialist Dorothy T. Kyle died in 40 CR. Incidentally, if you're wondering how all those people died, I believe that was in that ill-fated military push in order to push the Calibans out and away. And when they were searching for... what's her name? The daughter of the born man, Gutierrez, and what's-her-face. Anyway, them. That's why they all died. They all died there. Dorothy T. Kyle died in 40 CR. Specialist Egan I. Innes died in 36 CR. Specialist Lucas M. White, deceased as of 32 Colony Reckoning. Specialist Aaron 678-4578 Miles died in 49 CR. Specialist Upton R. Patrick, deceased in 38 Colony Reckoning. Specialist Jean T. Troyes died in 42 Colony Reckoning. Specialist Tyler W. Hammett died in 42 Colony Reckoning. Specialist Kelly N. Matsuo died in 44 CR. Specialist Belle M. Ryder, deceased in 48 CR. Specialist Vila K. James died 25 CR. Specialist Matthew R. Mays died in 29 Colony Reckoning. Specialist Adrian C. Potts, deceased in 27 Colony Reckoning. Specialist Vasily C. Orlov, deceased in 44 CR. Specialist Renata W. Corey died in 39 CR. Specialist Kito A. M. Kabir died in 43 CR. And Specialist Sita Chandras died in 22 CR. Then we have Master Sergeant Dinah L. Siguri, Communications, died in 22 CR. Specialist Young Kim died in 22 CR. Specialist Lee P. DeWitt died in 48 CR. Master Sergeant Thomas W. Oliver, Quartermaster, died in 39 CR. Corporal Nina N. Ferry died in 45 CR. Private First Class Hayes Brandon died in 48 CR. Lieutenant Romy T. Jones, Special Forces, died in 22 CR. Sergeant Jan Vandermeer died in 22 CR. Specialist Catherine S. Flanahan died in 22 CR. Specialist Charles M. Ogden died in 22 CR. I was wrong before. I believe those are the people who died then in the cave-in that occurred. Master Sergeant Zell T. Parham, Security, died in 22 CR. Under him, Corporal Quinton R. Witten died in 22 CR. Suffice it to say, that was a bad year. Captain Jessica N. Sedgwick, Confessor Advocate, died in 38 CR. Captain Bethan M. Dean, Surgeon, deceased in 46 Colony Reckoning. Captain Robert T. Hamill, Surgeon, deceased 32 Colony Reckoning. And Lieutenant Regan T. Childs, Computer Services, deceased in 29 Colony Reckoning. Civilian personnel. Secretarial personnel, 12. Medical/surgical, 1. Medical/paramedic, 7. Mechanical maintenance, 20. Distribution and warehousing, 20, including one Robert H. Davies, who died in Year 3, Colony Reckoning. Security, 12. Computer service, 4. Computer maintenance, 2. Librarian, 1. Agricultural specialists, 10, including Harold B. Hill, deceased in Year 32, Colony Reckoning. Geologists, 5. Meteorologist, 1. Biologists, 6. Including Marco X. Gutierrez, who died in 39 CR, and Ava K. Jenks died 38 CR. We also have Jane Flanahan Gutierrez, who lived from Colony Reckoning Year 2 to Colony Reckoning Year 50. And Ellie Flanahan Gutierrez, who was born in 23 Colony Reckoning and still lives to this day in Year 58. In education, we have 5, 1 cartographer, 4 management supervisors, 4 biocycle engineers, 50 construction personnel, food preparation specialists, 6, industrial specialists, 15, mining engineers, 2, energy systems supervisors, 8. Additional non-citizen personnel. We have in A class 2,890, including one Jin 458-9998, and Pia 86-687, died in 46 CR think they both did, but it only has it next to Pia's name. There are 12,389 B-class ASI, 4,566 M-class ASI, 20,788 P-class ASI, and 1,278 V-class ASI. Chapter 1. Communication. Alliance Security to AS Ajax. Survey and Report. Chapter 2. Year 58, Day 259, Colony Reckoning. The ship came down, all long-range contact negative, and settled at the site orbiting scan had turned up. And Weston Lake, Alliance forces ordered the hatch opened on a close view of the land, on a sprawl of human-made huts, on an eerie wilderness beyond, a landscape different than the sketchy Union charts told them they should find. Someone swore. "It's not right," another said. That was more than true. They waited 2 hours, expecting approach. It failed, except for a few small lizards. But trails of smoke went up among the trees. Oh, there's a comma there. But trails of smoke went up among the trees and the huts, the smoke of evening fires. Oh, I forgot that there was the family chart. I'll read that now. So we have a family tree here, the genealogy tree, in 58 Colony Reckoning. Let's see, what do we got here? So we have, this is just from Jin 458-9998 and Pia 86-687. There's an 18 there. That might be how old they were when they got there? I'm not sure. Anyway, they all gave birth to Jin 2, who was born in year 0 and continues to live till this day. Mark, who was born in year 3 and lived till year 29. Zed, who was born in year 4 and question mark. So he may or may not still be alive. Tam, who was born in year 5. Pia 2, who was born in year 6 and still lives. Oh, as does Tam. Tam also lives. And Green, who was born in year 8 and may or may not still be alive. Jin 2 had a family and gave birth to Jin 3, Pia 3, Tam 3, and Sunny. Jin 3 was born in year 29, Pia and is still alive. Pia 3 was born in year 30 and is still alive. Tam 3 was born in year 38 and is still alive. And Sunny was born in year 30 and still lives. Jin 3 gave birth to Jin 6, who was born in year 43 and still lives. Jin 6 gave birth to Jin 7, who was born in year 58, so they're a newborn, effectively. So, Tam, who was born in year 5 and is still kicking, gave birth to Cloud One-Eye in year 30. Jin 5 in year 31. Tam 2 in year 31. And Red Pia, also and born in year 32. Red Pia, all of them are still alive. Red Pia gave birth to Ellie Flanahan Gutierrez in year 23. Wait, what? No. Oh, that's because that one's down there. All right, that's why I'm confused. Very good. Pia, too, gave birth and had a family. They gave birth to Jin 4, who was born in year 30 and died in year 88. Wait, no, I'm misreading that. I'm not sure what the 88 signifies. Well, maybe he dies in year 88. We're not there yet, but it's saying that there. So, the book gave you spoilers, not me. Sired by Matthew R. Mays. He married Ellie Flanahan Gutierrez, who was born in year 23 and is still kicking. And they gave birth to Cloud 2, who was born in year 47 and continues to this day. Pia 2 also gave birth to Mark 3, who was born in year 32 and was sired by Ben. Zed 2, who was born in year 35 and was sired by Bran. And Pia 3, born in year 40 and sired by Kess. So Pia 2 sowed her wild oats. Anyway, there's something on there I'm not getting, like what the 18 under Jin 4589998 is. Matthew R. Mays maybe was 22 when he got to the colony. I'm not sure. Anyway, Chapter 3. There had been a sound like thunder, disturbing the too-close sick room where the old man lay, amid a clutter of worn-out blankets. An Ariel perched on the window-sill, and another enjoyed a permanent habitation in the stack of baskets by the door. The sound stopped. "Is it raining?" Jin Elder asked, stirring from that sleep that had held him neither here nor there. Pia tried to tell him something. And he was perplexed, because Jin Younger was there too, that tall man sitting on the chest by Pia. There was silver in his son's beard and in Pia's hair. When had they gotten so old? But Pia, his Pia, was dead long ago. Her sibs had gone close after her. The last of his had gone this spring. All were dead who had known the ships. None had lived so long as he, if it was life, to lie here dreaming. There was none that recalled the things he remembered. The faces confused him, not clear types such as he had known, but still much like those he had known. Oh, not clear types such as he had known, but still much like those he had known. "Mark," he called, and "Green." But Mark was dead, and Green was lost long ago. They told him Zed had vanished too. "I'm here," someone said. Jin. He recalled them and focused on the years in the curious way things would slip into focus and go out again. His children had come back to him, at least Jin and Pia had. "I don't think he understands." Pia's voice, a whisper, across the room. "It's no good, Jin." "Huh." "He always used to talk about the ships." "We could take him outside." "I don't think he'd even know." Silence a moment. Darkness a moment. He felt far away. "Is he breathing?" "Not very strong." "Father, do you hear? The ships have come." Over the fields of grain, high in blue skies, a thin splinter of silver. He knew what it was to fly. Had flown once. It was a hot day. They might swim in the creek when they were done with the harvest, with the sun heating the earth and making the sweat run on his back. "Father?" Into the bright, bright sun. Chapter 4. Pia, now eldest, walked out into the light, grim, looked round at the knot of hangers-on, the young, the scatter of children they had sent to Jinn. "He's gone," she said. Solemn faces. A handful of them, from about a hand of years to twice that. Solemn eyes. "Go on," Pia said, and picked up a stick. "We get first stuff. Get. Go to old John. Go to Ben. Go to wherever you like. There's nothing for you here." They ran. Some cried. They knew her right arm, one of the Hillers who seldom came into town at all, Pia eldest. No timid town dweller they could put anything off on. She followed them with her eyes, down the row of ramshackle limestone houses, the last ragtag lot of youngers old Jinn had had. They might be kin or just strays. The old man had been readier than most to take them in. The worst stayed with old Jinn. He never hit them, and they had stolen his food until Pia found out. And then there had been no more stealing. No. She went inside, into the stench of the unkempt house, into the presence of the dead, suddenly lacking in obligation, realizing that she had nothing more to do. Her brother Jinn was going through the chest, and laid claim to the other blanket besides the one old Jinn was wrapped in. She frowned at that, stood there leaning on her stick. "You don't want anything?" Jinn asked her. He stood up, half a head taller. They wore their hair short, alike, wore boots of Caliban hide and shirts and breeches of coarse town weave, looked like as all old Jinn and Pia's offspring. "You can have the blanket." That surprised her. She shook her head, still scowling. "Don't want anything. Got enough." "Go on, you fed him the last 3 years." She shrugged. "Your food, too." "You made the trips." "So, no matter. Didn't do it for that." "Owe you for the blanket," her brother said. "Collect it someday. What's town to us? I don't want what smells of it." Jinn looked aside, on the small and withered form beneath the other blanket, looked up at her again. "We go?" "I'll wait for the burying." "We could take him up in the hills. There's those. Would carry." She shook her head. "This is his place." "This." Jinn rolled the razor and the plastic cup into the blanket, tucked them under his arm. "Filth. Get up to the hills. Those new born men, they'll come here. There'll be trouble, that's all. Jinn's ships. He thought everything the main campers did was all right. How could he know so much and so little?" "I had myself a main camper once. He said the old Azzy had to think like Jinn, that's all." "Maybe they did. Anything the main campers wanted. Only now there's new main campers. You remember how it was. You remember what it was when old Gallen had the say in main camp. That's what it'll be again. You mind me, Pia, you don't wait for the burying, or they'll have you plowing fields." She spat, half a laugh. "You mind me," Jinn said. "That's how it was. Mark and Zed and Tam and I, we ran out on it." "So did I. It wasn't hard." She took a comb Jinn had left. "This. I'll keep this." "They'll be coming here." "They'll bring things." "Tape machines. They'll catch the youngers and line us up in rows." "Maybe they should." "You thinking like him?" She walked away to the door, looked out above the abandoned, Caliban-haunted domes and the fallen sun tower, where vines had had their way, where the town stopped. The ship sat there in the distant plain, shining silver, visible above the roofs. "You don't go," Jinn argued with her, coming and talking to her shoulders. "You don't be going out there talking to those born men." "No," she agreed. "Forget the stinking born men." "Aren't we?" "What?" "Born men. We were born here." "I'm going," Jinn said. "Come along." "I'll walk with you to the trail." She started on her way. There was nothing to carry but the staff, and what Jinn chose to keep. and behind them the town would break in and steal. So, old Jin was gone, and she was sitting by the doorway when they brought the new men to her. They disturbed her with their strangeness, as they disturbed the town. There were those who were ready to be awed by them, she saw that, but she looked coldly at the newcomers, and kept her mind to herself. Their clothes were all very fine, like the strange tight weave which the looms the town made nowadays could never. Did I skip a word? No, I didn't. Their clothes were all very fine, like the strange tight weave which the looms the town made nowadays could never duplicate. Their hair was short as Hillers wore it, and they smelled of sharp, strange scents. "They said there was a man here who came on the ships," the first of them said. He had a strange way of talking, not that the words were unclear, just the sound of them was different. Pia wrinkled her nose. "He died." "You're his daughter. They said you might talk to us. We'd like you to come and do that. Aboard the ship, if you'd like." "Won't go there." Her heart beat very fast, but she kept her face set and grim and unconcerned. They had guns. She saw that. "Sit." They looked uncomfortable or offended. One squatted down in front of her, a man in blue weave with a lot of metal and stripes that meant importance among born men. She remembered. "P is your name." She nodded shortly. "You know what happened here? Can you tell us what happened here?" "My father died." "Was he born?" She pursed her lips. All the rest knew that much, whatever it meant, because it had never made sense to her how a man could not be born. "He was something else," she said. "You remember the way it was at the beginning. What happened to the domes?" The gesture of a smooth white hand toward the ruins where Calibans made walls. "Disease? Sickness?" "They got old," she said. "Mostly." "But the children, the next generation." She remembered and chuckled to herself, grew sober again, thinking on the day that the born men died. There were children," the man insisted. "Weren't there?" She drew a pattern in the dust, scooped up sand and drew with it, a slow trickling from her hand. "Sarah, what happened to the children?" Sarah being S-E-R-A, it is the female equivalent of, it's honorific for a woman. We will see that in Citeen, I believe. So that's a thing. Where were we? I got lost in the sauce. "Sarah, what happened to the children?" "Got children," she said. "Mine." "Where?" She looked up, fixed the stranger with her stronger eye. "Some here, some there, one dead." The man sucked in his lips, thinking. "You live up in the hills." "Live right here." "They said you were out of the hills. They're afraid of you, Sarah Pia." It was not, perhaps, wise to make patterns in the dust. The man was sharp. She dumped sand atop the spiral she had made. "Live here, live there." "Listen," he said earnestly, leaning forward. "There was a plan. There was going to be a city here. Do you know that? Do you remember lights? Machines?" She gestured loosely toward the mirrors and the tower, the wreckage of them amid the Caliban burrowings in main camp. "They fell. The machines are old." She thought of the lights aglow again. The town might come alive with these strangers here. She thought of the machines coming to life again and eating up the ground and leveling the burrows and the mounds. It made her vaguely uncomfortable. Her brother was right. They meant to plow the land again. She sensed that, looking into the pale blue eyes. "You want to see the old camp? Youngers'll take you there." And on the other side there was a lack of trust, dead silence. Of course, they had seen the mounds. It was strange territory. "Maybe you might go with us." She got up, looked round her at the townfolk who tried to be looking elsewhere, at the ground, at each other, at the strangers. "Come on, then," she said. They talked to their ship. She remembered such tricks as they used, but the voices coming out of the air made the children shriek. "Old stuff," she said sourly, and reached for old Jin's stick that he had by the door. By the door, leaned on it as if she were tired and slow. "Come on, come on." Two of them would go with her. Three stayed in the village. She walked with them up the road, in amongst the weeds and ruins. She walked slowly, using the stick. And when she had gotten into the wild place, she hit them both and ran away, heading off among the Caliban retreats until her side ached and she needed the stick. But she was free, and as for the mounds, she knew how to skirt them and where the accesses were to be avoided. She came by evening into the wooded slopes, up amongst the true rock-hearted hills. Someone whistled, far and lonely in the woods where flitters and aerials darted and slithered. It was a human sound. One of the watchers had seen her come. "Home," the whistle said to her. She whistled back. "Pia," her whistle said. There were friends and enemies here, but she had her knife, and she brought away a comb and her father's stick, confident and set upon her way. At least old Jin had not been crazy. She knew that now. She had seen the ships come, and she remembered the born men who had lived in the domes, who had died and mingled their types with Azzy, some in the hills and some few scratching the land with wooden plows. There were ships again, and born men to own the world. Azzy, marching in rows, her brother Jin had said. But she was not Azzy, and she would never march to their orders. Chapter 5. Strangers. Green wrinkled his nose and blinked in the light, perceiving disruption in the pattern made on the plain. There was a new motion now. He felt the stirrings underground, recognizing it. The disquiet grew extreme. He dived back into the dark, finding his way with body and direction sense rather than with eyes. Small folk skittered past him as he went, muddy slitherings of long-tailed bodies past his bare legs as he stooped and hastened along in that sure-footed gait he had learned very long ago, hands before him in the dark, bare feet scuffing along the muddy bottom. Jeez Louise, that sentence went on forever. With just a couple tiny commas to delineate breaks. That was how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? 5.5? Anyway. Sorry, let's try the paragraph from the top. The disquiet grew extreme. He dived back into the dark, finding his way with body and direction sense rather than with eyes. Small folk skittered past him as he went, muddy slitherings of long-tailed bodies past his bare legs as he stooped and hastened along in that sure-footed gait he had learned very long ago, hands before him in the dark, bare feet scuffing along the muddy bottom. His toes met a serpentine and living object in the dark. His skin felt an interruption in the draft that should blow in this corridor. His ears picked up the sough of breathing. I think that's how S-O-U-H is pronounced. He knew what his fingers would meet before they met it, and he simply scrambled up the tail and over the pebble-leathery back, doing the great brown less damage than its blunt claws could do to him in getting past. The brown gave a throaty exhalation, flicked an inquisitive tongue about his shoulders, and when he simply scurried on, it slithered after. It wanted to know, then. It was interested. Green darted up again, taking branches of the tunnels which led nearer the strangers. He was, after all, green and old, almost the oldest of his kind, in his way superior to the elder brown which whipped along after him. It wanted to know, and he changed his plans and darted up again to daylight to show it. When he had come to the light again, up where trees crested the mound, where he had free view of the town and the shining thing which had come to rest in the meadow, the brown squatted by him to look too. He made the pattern for it, pattern with a capital P. He offered up what he had, making the spirals rightwise up to a point and leftwise thereafter. The brown moved heavily and seized up a twig fallen from the trees, crunched it in massive jaws. The crest was up. The eyes were more dark than gold. Green sat with the muscles at his own nape tightening, lacking expression for his confusion. The brown was distraught. It was everywhere evident. It nosed him suddenly, directing him back inside the mound. He reached the cool, safe dark, and still it pushed at him, herding him toward the deepest sanctuary. There were others gathered in the dark. They huddled together, and in time one of the browns came to herd them further. It was days that they traveled in that way, until they had come far upriver, to the new mounds, and here they stayed, able to take the sun again, here where Calibans made domes and walls, and Caliban young and greys came out to sun, heedless of the danger westward. Chapter 6. Time T51 days MAT. Mission apparent time, I think. Alliance probe Boreas. Report to be couriered to Alliance security operations under seal Cole/M/Taylor/ASB/Spec/Op/Newport project. Initial exploration in Sector A on accompanying chart number A-1 shows complete collapse of Union authority. The prefab domes are deserted, overgrown with brush. The solar array is indicated by a letter on chart... the solar array is indicated by letter A on chart number A-1, lying under the wreckage of the tower. Brush has grown over most of it. Inquiry among inhabitants produces no clear response except that the fall occurred perhaps a decade previous. This may have been due to weather. On the other hand, the prefab domes sit amid a convoluted system of ridges identical to those observed throughout the riverside and named in orbiting survey reports 1 to 23. We have found the Caliban mounds predicted by Union information on the site, but there is no close agreement between present circumstance and Union records. If one example might illustrate the disturbing character of the site, chart number A-1 may serve. It is inconceivable that the original colony would have established their domes and fields in the center of the mound system. What was level terrain in the Union records is now a corrugated landscape overgrown with brush. When asked what became of the residents of the domes, the townsmen answer that some of them came to the town, and some went to the hills. Orbiting survey does show, in chart number A2, a second settlement in the hills about 10 kilometers from the town, but considering the potential risk of extending interference without understanding the interrelation of the systems, the mission has confined itself to the perimeter outlined for the colony. There was, however, one interview with a woman, one Pia, no other name known, who has vanished from the community after assaulting mission personnel she had agreed to guide. See section number 2 of this report, and who may have retreated to the hills. The transcript of the Pia interview is included as document C, section 12. The economy of the town and that of the dwellers in the hills are perhaps linked in trade. See documents in C section, especially section 11. When questioned regarding the Calibans, the townsmen generally look away and affect not to have heard. If pressured, they refuse direct answer. The interviewers have not been able to ascertain whether the townsmen hold the Calibans in some fear or whether they distrust the interviewers. The mission finds the townsmen politically naive, existing in a Neolithic lifestyle. The individual Pia recalled technology, and no inhabitants seem surprised at modern equipment, but if there is any technology among them other than a few items originally imported from off-world, the mission has not observed it. They plow with hand-pushed wooden plows, have no metals except what was originally imported, and apparently do not have high-temperature forging techniques necessary to work what metal they do have. Weaving and pottery are known, and may conceivably have been an independent discovery. If there is ritual, religion, or ceremonies of passage, we have yet to discover them, unless there is in fact some superstition regarding the Calibans. There is no writing except in primitive accounts of food inventory. Spelling is not regular, nor is the majority literate beyond the capacity to make tallies. There has been some linguistic change on which we might derive more information if we knew the world of origin of these Union colonists and the Azzi. See Document E. The accent is distinctive after less than a century of isolation, indicative of a very early breakdown of formal education, but the forms of standard grammar remain, not uncommon in Azzi-descended populations where precise adherence to instruction has been tape-fed as a value. The local nomenclature has changed. Few townsmen recognize Newport as the name of the colony. Their word for their world is Gehenna, while the primary is called simply the Sun, and the principal river on which they have settled they name Styx. The literary allusion is not known to them. There is no indication that the inhabitants understand any political affiliation to Union, or that there will be any active opposition to alliance operations or governance. There is, however, a second and more serious consideration, and it is one which the mission hesitates, in the absence of more evidence, to present to the Bureau. While Union documents describe the highest life form as non-sapient, evidence points to Caliban intrusion into human living area during the colony's height. It would be speculative at this point to suggest that Caliban activity may have led directly to the decline of the colony, but it is remarkable that the decline has been so thorough and so rapid. Dissension and political strife among the colonists might have disrupted human civilization, but the town, of considerable population, does not show any fear or carry any weapons excepting utilitarian objects such as knives or sticks, and does not threaten with them. We do not yet have a census, but the town is a little smaller than we would expect. Granted the usual Union colonial base, the world population in 50 years might well exceed 100,000 by natural reproduction alone. Possibly poor health care and limited food have worked to keep the rate of increase somewhat lower than average, although families observed are large. Possibly there was a conflict. Possibly there was decimation by conflict or disease. Based on information given by townsmen, nomadism may be a factor to be considered both in population estimates and in politics. The town numbers perhaps as many as 70,000, with extremely crowded conditions. There are small outlying settlements of less than 1,000 individuals sharing town fields, and probably established for convenience. The heart of the town is limestone slab construction, but the outlying districts and later additions to central district houses are brick and timber, indicating change of supply or change in technological level. Access to the limestone of the central hills may have been cut off, perhaps marking some change of affairs regarding hill communities and the town, but it would be speculation at this point to draw any conclusion. There is division of labor into brick-making, pottery, weaving, agriculture. There are no domestic animals. Clothing is linen-like from the cultivation of local plants. There has been a successful economic adaptation to locally available materials, and insofar as success of a colony might be its ability to remain viable and without off-world supply, Newport, or Gehenna as the locals name it, has achieved at least a tenuous success. The atmosphere is overall agrarian and tranquil, although our military advisors persist in warnings that they may be awaiting the departure of the ship and attempting to secure an advantage of surprise. The scientific mission doubts this, but will, of course, take suggested precautions.
The mission, for its part, has advised that extreme precautions extend to native life forms.
From Section D, Mission Report, Dr. Sina Kendrick. Intelligence is not, as indicated above, a scientific term. I have objected to the description sapience in previous studies, and again take issue with biological studies which attempt to attach this imprecise assessment of adaptive and problem-solving capacities to non-human life forms. Two considerations must be made. First, that an organism's behaviors may be survival positive in one environment and not in another, and second, that its perceptive apparatus, its input devices, may be efficient for one environment but not for another. The quality imprecisely described as intelligence is commonly understood to describe the generalization of an organism, i.e., its capacity to adapt by the use of analogy to a variety of situations and environments. On the contrary, even the concept of analog is anthropocentric. Logic is another anthropocentric imprecision, the attempt to impose an order, binary, for instance, or sequential, on observations which themselves have been filtered through imprecise perceptive organs. The only claim which may be made for generalization as a desirable trait is that it seems to permit survivalism in a multitude of environments. The same may be said of generalization as part of the definition of intelligence, particularly when intelligence is used as a criterion of the inherent value of an organism, or its right to life or territory when faced with human intrusion. Generalization permits migration in the face of encroachment, and it permits one species to encroach on another, which adds another dimension to natural selection. But when extended to intrusion not over another mountain ridge within the same planetary ecology and the same genetic heritage, but instead to intrusion of one genetic heritage upon another across the boundaries of hitherto uncrossable space, this value judgment loses some credibility. The dominant life form on Gehenna 2 is a scaly endothermic quadruped without aesthetic attraction. The description that leaps too readily to mind is reptile, which does not adequately describe an interior structure which is not reptilian or pertinent to any previously catalogued life form. It does not describe behaviors such as mound building or suggest reasons for an advance into human territory. Nor does it adequately describe the adaptive process by which this life form succeeds in the face of a human colony armed with modern weapons, furnished with heavy construction equipment, and established with the precedent of many previous successes. I dissent from the mission opinion which seeks to debate whether the Union colony may have contaminated a sapiens. I dissent not to condone the intrusion of humankind into this ecosystem, but to protest a proceeding which will attempt, on the basis of quantitative anthropocentric standards, to determine the relative value of a life form against the desire of humankind to possess what this world has held until now unique within the rules established by its own genetic heritage.
Report, Document E. Dr. Carl Ebron.
Observation indicates human sites scattered through the hills to such an extent that it would take years and force to lift human presence off this planet. The colonists at the town might obey a summons to be lifted off. It is doubtful that others would be receptive, and the result of any attempt to remove the human population would be a scattering of human presence on a world where humanity can survive without technology. The end result is still contamination, and possibly hostility, which might be exploited centuries hence. We are ironically faced with a first contact situation involving our own species, a situation fraught with the direst potential hazard to zonal stability and peace. My own recommendation is a quarantined observation point, allowing what has begun here to take as natural a course as is possible under regrettable circumstances. The other logical solution, a thorough sterilization of the entire area of possible contamination, the elimination of both human and native life forms in the hope of preserving a planet from contamination, is draconian and unthinkable.
We are human beings. Our morality constrains us from such a decision as might undo an evil. I do not know whether this is, a term to which Dr. Kendrick would object, intelligent on humanity's part, but it is certain that nothing on this world offers us resistance or seems to mean us harm, and I see no choice but the maintenance of the status quo until such time as a more informed decision might be made. Document G. Dr. Chandra Cartier. Cartier, perhaps? I respectfully dissent from Drs. Kendrick and Ebron. Dr. Kendrick's thesis, taken in the extreme, might be extended to every life form on every world, but I believe that the hazard on Gehenna is more specific, without claiming that it is mindful or sapient. The danger is in ourselves, that humankind and human civilization have failed so miserably here, and that we are raising atavistic suspicions of aliens in our midst. I object to the proposition that human beings be quarantined and observed in poverty, disease, and ignorance to protect the supposed value of native life which has not evidenced any creative capacity. I object to the proposition that there is not relative value involved, the value of human beings trapped in a situation of squalor and futility, neither of which may be scientific terms, but both of which have stark value. But both of which have stark value on a world whose less civilized inhabitants named it hell. I propose, on the contrary, that it would be a crime against humanity to wall ourselves off from these people. On the contrary, we should bring hospitals, educational facilities, and bring these survivors into the modern age, at least to the extent that they become capable of transforming Gehenna into a viable colony. From the Neolithic to the space age may be too great a leap for one generation, but metal plows and engines to pull them are not too great a leap. Rejuve and modern medicine are not too great a leap. Aid in years of bad weather, advice in agriculture, the judicious importation of plants and livestock, all these things are minimal response to this human suffering. I do not dignify with a response the suggestion advanced by Dr. Ebron that neither humankind nor native life might count against the ideal of ecological restoration. He is correct. The idea is inhuman. As for Dr. Kendrick's debate of values, it is attractive only in the abstract. Taken in substance, it would have starved our species out of existence as soon as it had conceived the theory. Our intelligence, whether anthropocentric or otherwise, advises us that we have ensured the survival of terrene species by our actions. Whales survive in the oceans of Cytene, bears and seals and other species on Eversnow. Was this moral? Is it moral for us to have left our ancestral sun? Human history is collision, not stasis. It is inhuman not to preserve these people in a reasonable quality of life. There must be a perimeter established here within which humanity can retreat to remain human, and that perimeter must be defended with whatever measures are necessary until investigation has established what we have done on this world. The fact that this world has reduced one well-equipped human effort to the Neolithic is eloquent enough argument that humankind has to be wiser in its dealings with this environment and what lives here. Basically, it's a mess. And they don't really know what to do about it. Chapter 7. Alliance HQ, Newport/Gehenna Mission, couriered by A.S. Boreas. Equipment and personnel arriving with this message will permit the expansion of a secure perimeter to include the landing site and town and fields as well as a river access. Establishment of permanent health care and educational facilities for Newport/Gehenna citizens should be given a high priority, but security of Alliance personnel and equipment must not be compromised in the process, regarding force of nature or force of arms, and not excluding the possibility of action by Union agents or native life forms. This office has contacted Union colonial offices with a further request for data on humanitarian grounds, and there has been some negotiation opened in this manner, but progress is likely to be minimal and slow. In the absence of further information, the mission is instructed to establish a perimeter as wide as possible without conflict and within the limits of available equipment and security and tactical considerations. Conflict is to be avoided with humans and native life, but this prohibition does not extend to the function of effective fencing devices. The Bureau draws no conclusion on the sapience or competency of the Calibans and awaits further data, which the mission will supply. The priorities of the mission will be as follows. 1. To secure the area of its own operation. 2. To determine whether any activity of any other outside agency might exist. If so, to take appropriate measures. 3. To secure the area of the town and adjacent villages necessary for establishment of a viable economy. 4. To assist colonists with medical and educational facilities. 5. To encourage trade with the center of colonization in preference to trade with those in outlying areas, with a view of centralization of economy and facilities and the establishment of an alliance-influenced capital which will tend to draw scattered human settlements toward the landing site by the attraction of food and stability, minimizing future political difference. 6. To educate all available citizenry in hygiene, agriculture, small manufacture, and government. 7. To defend against encroachment by native agency by the use of whatever force is minimally sufficient to deter the attempt, up to and including lethal arms. Closely following this equipment delivery, another ship will follow, bringing a station module and personnel for the core of a permanent manned orbiting port, which will monitor the majority of Newport planetary surface and serve, with the addition of a shuttle by future shipment, to maintain constant surveillance and flow of supplies. It is not Bureau policy to permit a colony to suffer failure from neglect. The human inhabitants, regardless of origin, are now an alliance polity, but must be dealt with under Section 9 procedures as a first contact. The mission is urged to provide answers to questions of local sapience, and particularly to assist the station when operational in determining what planetary areas might be developed without contact with high life forms. Of high priority, therefore, is the establishment of a landing area at Newport Base. Chapter 8. Newport Base Briefing Room. Then the decision is to exploit, Ebron said, in potential disregard of native life.
It's a political decision, said Kendrick. We're in the proposed path of expansion. They want Gehenna. That's what it comes to. Union seeded it, we cultivate it. They're happy, you understand that. They're actually relieved the population sunk to the Stone Age. And devil take the Calibans.
That's off the record, Cartier said. Kendrick drew a breath and let it go again.
That's off the record. Of course it's off the record. You had your way, didn't you?
No, said Cartier. Unfortunately, I didn't. Okay. Give me a sec here. That's really weird. Okay, so for whatever reason, it's just printed weird. All the pages are intact. They're just in a strange order. So now I have to add 2 more images, one of which is a map, comma space updated, and the other of which is another genealogy. Because we're doing another time skip, ladies and gents. We're skipping from year 58 to year 72. That's 396 and 397. Okay. Three, 9, 6 and 397. Okay. I'm just adding them to the list of slides, so you'll see comparisons now.
So, as some quick descriptions go, we've got Gehenna base, which has cleared out a bunch of mound stuff. In fact, we don't really see any Caliban mounds until you go up the Styx River a ways. And there's a big formation there. The Hillers still have their encampment, but there's been a lot of clear cutting going on of the brush around the river head. And there's some marshy area there, which you can see fairly clearly, which was there before, but it was difficult to see. There looked to be a bunch of agrarian stuff and a couple additional farming outpost type things. All right, now we have the family tree. What do we got on the family tree? Genealogy. Colony Reckoning Year 72. Gehenna Outpost. 235. So, what's changed? We now have a Jin 8, who was born in CR 71. Born from Jin 7, who was born from Jin 6, who was born from Jin 3. Most of Jin's kids have died now, except for Pia, maybe Zed, and maybe Green. Jin 2 died in year 62. Mark died in year 29. We knew that. Tam died in year 58. Let's see. All of Pia's kids are still alive. Jin 4, Pia's child, gave birth to Cloud 2 in year 47. Who has given birth to Cloud 3, M, who talks to Pia, who was born in year 62. Incidentally, Ellie Flanahan Gutierrez is still kicking. Red Pia is still around, Tam 2 is still around, Jin 5 is still around, all of Tam 1's kids. Cloud 1-Eye is still alive, maybe, but it doesn't show actually a birth or death year. So Jin 2's kids, all his direct descendants appear to be deceased. Sunny died in year 89, sorry. So they're just skipping ahead a bit. Tam died in year 94. Pia 3 died in year 89, and Jin 3 died in year 78. Jin 3 gave birth to Jin 6, who died in year 43, who died in 69. Jin 7, they gave birth to Jin 7 in year 58, and they died in year 89. And then Jin 8 was born in year 71 and is still kicking. Pia 2 is now known as Ma Pia. So she's a granny type now. All right. Back to the text. Chapter 9. Year 72, Day 130, Colony Reckoning. The Hills. It was many a day that Pia Elder sat atop her hill, watching the coming and going in the camp, a long, hard walk for an old woman, and the first such walk of the spring. Cloud was panting when he had come so far, and relieved that the old woman was here. His heart was beating very hard when he came up the slope, partly because the old woman was sitting very still, but she often did that, and his mother had done that when she was dead, and partly because he was afraid of this old woman, who was thin and dry as a stick and strange enough to do things like this, coming out before dawn to look at a place she would not go. "Ma Pia," he said very quietly, and circled to the side of her and came facing her, squatted down with his elbows tucked between his knees.
It was cold in the morning wind. He was cold. He shivered, looking into a face wrinkled like old fruit, and eyes like black sticks stone, water smoothed and cold. She let her hair grow. Neglect, he guessed.
Ma Pia, father, he wished he was you.
Oh, my God. Syntax is wild.
Ma Pia, father, he wished we was you well.
Ma Pia, okay. So it says, Ma Pia, comma, father he wished was you well, comma, Ma Pia. Which, believe it or not, is almost impossible to say aloud. For my brain.
Ma Pia, father he wished was you well, Ma Pia.
A while longer the implacable eyes gave him nothing. Then Pia Elder lifted a bony arm from beneath her blanket.
New buildings this spring.
He looked, turning his head and turning on his haunches. It was so that there were more buildings in the camp, tall and strange buildings. Perhaps the old woman was being conversational with him. He looked back at her, hoping that it would be easy to get her home.
They've smoothed the mounds, leveled the way to the river, the old woman said, but you don't remember how it was. They made the mounds flat. And they go on building. See how the fields go, right across the plain. See where the fences go. Mustn't touch them fences, the power'll hurt you.
She whipped out her arms straight toward him, snapped her fingers. It had as well been a blow. Might have been if she had had her stick in her hand. He clenched his arms in shock.
Them fences.
Oh, that's her.
Them fences. Those fences, Ma Pia.
He was trembling from the hour, the cold, the old woman's eyes.
Who taught you to talk? Stupid nines lot? No, Ma Pia. You talk here, not like nines breed, not like my brother Jins either. You know why, boy? To go and come, he recited, to be like born men, like them.
He stammered on the word and the cold. The old woman's eyes bored down on him, and he swallowed and picked his word.
Like them down there in the camp, to be born man.
A moment more the old woman stared at him, shivering in front of her, and then she opened her blanket, inviting him into the warmth of her arms. He came because she frightened him, and she had never done this since he was small, and because his teeth were chattering from the morning chill. He was 10. He was old enough to be afraid of her body, which had stopped being woman or man. So old she was, so thin and hard and frail at once, and she had stopped being anything he understood. She smelled of smoke and herbs when her arm and the blanket enfolded him. She felt like one of the Ariels, all dry and strange. Her hair was white and coarse when he looked up at her. Her arm hugged him with an unsuspected tenderness, waking memories of earliest years, of being a child, and she rocked him, Ma Pia, whose face did not know how to laugh.
I had a brother, she said. His name was Green. He went away into the mounds. Before that, he forgot how to talk. You never do that. You never do that, young cloud. I can write my name, he said.
The arm tightened about him.
Every year more buildings down there. They want us to come. They make their fences, and they want us inside. Sometimes I think I'd like to go down and see, but they've changed it all. And our kind doesn't get into the center of it, just the town. There were domes. There were born men that lived there. I remember the day the ships came back, and there was a forest where the center of the buildings is now. And mounds. And the Calibans weren't all upriver. Nothing could move them until the ships came, and the fences, and then the Calibans left, and all the weirds with them, right up the sticks, and to other side. So Green went. I think he must be dead now. It was a long time ago.
He was silent then, victim of this outpouring of old things, frightening things, because he saw the buildings growing too, constantly changing.
Your father was my oldest boy. You look like him, those eyes. Where'd you get my grandfather?
He went brave of a sudden and twisted about and looked into her eyes.
Don't know, she said. I found that boy.
That was always the answer. And then,
I think I got him off a Bornman's son.
She ruffled his hair.
Maybe off a Weird. What would you say?
His face went hot.
No, she said. I don't remember. That's the way it is. It's cold. I'm walking back.
Tell me. The old lips pursed.
I think I got him off this Bornman. I do think I did. He was a pretty boy. Such pretty hair, like yours. Name was Maze. He came into the hills, but he never stood the first winter. So fine he was. But he just faded out. My boy had none of that. He was strong. But your mother, she died birthing a baby. I know. Birthing's hard. Lots do it. Lots die.
She gripped his face in a hard, thin hand, turned his eyes toward her, and the blanket fell away so that he was cold.
She was Ellie Flanahan Gutierrez, and she had hair like yours. She was a born man's daughter. Her mother went down in the mounds and came out pregnant.
He shook his head, teeth chattering. She would not let him go.
My father was Jin, my mother Pia. They had numbers. Born men made them. They had me and Jin. Mark, he's dead long time. And Zed, you never knew him. He hunted, and one day he didn't come back.
Or is this... Oh. Yep, this is her talking. My bad. We'll take that from the top. He shook his head, teeth chattering. She would not let him go.
My father was Jin, my mother Pia. They had numbers. Born men made them. They had me and Jin. Mark, he's dead long time. And Zed, you never knew him. He hunted, and one day he didn't come back. And Tam oldest, and me, and Green, who went into the mounds. And old Jin, the second Jin, he had Jin younger, and Pia younger, and Tam younger, and Cloud eldest, and Sonny and others he didn't know, and Sonny and others he didn't know, and no one did. Maybe Ellie Flanahan. Maybe. Zed had nobody. But he could have had Ellie. If he did, it was his only... What? If he did, it was his only that anyone knows. What? If he did, it was his only that anyone knows. I feel like there's a word missing there. Tam oldest and Tam youngest, and Jin youngest, and Red Pia, and Cloud One Eye. Or maybe he had Ellie Flanahan. And Green, he was 13 when he went into the mounds, and Jane Flanahan did, and, you know, Cloud youngest, you look most like Green. He had hair like that, and eyes like that, and you're small like he was small. Maybe it was Green, or maybe it was 100 more, who live in the dark in the mounds. You talk, Cloud, you read, and you write your name, and maybe someday you go down to the new camp and plow the fields. I'm a hiller.
It was protest. His shivers were convulsive.
My ma, she wasn't what you say. Call your oldest Ellie, the old woman said, making him believe she was crazy as they said, or Green, and you teach them to talk, hear me, Cloud?
She drew with her finger on the ground, among the dead grass, as if she had forgotten him.
This is the sun rising.
A backward spiral.
This is setting, or change. Pebbles one on the other, that's building. There's the big browns and the stupid grays and the little greens. And there's those have seen the sea folk beach in the river in the dark before the ships came back. There's a thing I saw. It was like Caliban, but not. Only one. It was big, Cloud. In the river, near the sea. I never saw the like again. Lots of things I could never tell the olders. And now there's lots of things I can't tell the youngers. Is that fair?"
"I'm cold, Ma Pia. I'm cold. Please, let's go. My father told me to come."
"Here." She took off the blanket from about her shoulders. She wore leather with fringes, all the clothes she ever wore. She wrapped it about his shoulders and stood up with the staff she had had by her in the grass. She moved slowly, grimacing lines deeper into her wrinkled face. And when he got to his feet, she tousled his hair again, touched his face in a gentle way Ma Pia had never used. And then she walked away toward the north.
"Ma Pia!"
Cloud cried, exasperated. He clutched her blanket around him and ran after, the edges fluttering as he hurried.
"Ma Pia, that's the wrong way. That's the river that way."
The old were like that, forgetting where they were. He was embarrassed for her, for fierce old Pia, and angry for all she had said, and grateful for the blanket.
"It's this way."
She stopped and stood.
"I thought I might go down to the camp today, but there's no one there to see. Thought I might like a hot meal and maybe look at the machines like the old days. But they make fences down there, and you have to ask to come in and ask to come out, and they might think I was old and sick, eh? I'd die if they shut me in, and that's no way to go. Our village stinks, you know that, Cloud. It smells like the town down there smells. It smells like the town down there smells, like it smelled the day the first gin died. I'm tired of stink. I think I'll take a walk upriver, see where the Calibans have gone."
"Ma Pia, that's a long way. I don't think you ought to do that." She smiled, a face that was set with years of scowls. It shook his world, that smile, so that he knew he had never known her.
"I think I might about make it," she said. "Mind you talk, Cloud. Mind you read and write."
And she walked away. He was guilty, coward, standing there, but she never called him after her.
"She's an older," he thought. "She's oldest of the old, like the hills themselves, she is. She knows whether she wants a boy at her heels. She knows how to find her way to home. She knows where she's going and how far she means to walk.
And she's beautiful, he thought, which he had never thought in his life about Pia Oldest, but she was, tall and straight and thin, with the wind dancing in the fringes of her clothes and the gray ropes of her hair, going away from him because she wanted to. He ran back to the village in the hills and told his father, who sent young runners out to find her, but they could not. They never could, Pia being Pia and better than any of them in the wild. It was days before he cried, and then only for a moment. He imagined she found the Calibans, that being what she wanted. He thought of Calibans all his life, thought of them in getting his son and telling him tales, and seeing some of his kin go down to the camp in the plain. Calibans moved close again after Ma Pia went away. He was never sure if she had found them, but that thing was sure. Chapter 10. Year 72, Day 198, Colony Reckoning. Main Base, Gehenna. Oh, do we know who this doctor is? I don't know. All right. Very good. I didn't see a name, so I don't think it's an established character. New voice time! "Are you?" the man asked. "Scared?" The boy, Dean, stared at him, sitting where he was on the edge of the doctor's table in the center of the base, and the answer was yes, but he was not about to say as much to this base doctor. Children did this, he knew, went into the base and learned.
And he was here half-grown as he was because they started taking older ones now, special older ones, who ran off from their work in the fields and lazed about working with their hands or being a problem to the supervisors. He had been a problem. He had told the field boss how to arrange the shifts, and the boss had not liked that. So he had walked off shift, that was all. He had had enough of the man. Only they took people who bucked what was, and soldiers visited their houses and brought them into the base, behind the inmost wire, to go into the study like they took the children the family sold into going in here every day. What the hell? I think my brain skipped a line and couldn't keep up. Only they took people who bucked what was, and soldiers visited their houses and brought them into the base, behind the inmost wire, to go into the study like they took the children their families sold into going here every day for extra credit at the store. They did this to children, so he was not going to admit he was scared. They went on asking him questions. Do you read or write? Does anyone you know read and write? He said nothing. His name was Dean, which was a born man name. His mother had told him that, and taught him to write his name and read the signs. But he figured it was theirs to find out. My mother get the store allowance? He asked finally, reckoning if there was good to be gotten out of this, it might as well be hers. Depends on how you do, the man with the book said, turning him back his own kind of answer. You do real well, Dean, and you might get a lot more than that. He viewed it all with suspicion. Now we're going to start out with lessons, going to let you watch the machines. And when you've gone beyond what they can teach you, then you get paid. And if you think you want to learn more than that, well, we'll see. We'll see how you do. Don't drop that. They put him in front of a machine that lighted up and showed him A and made the sound. It went to B then and showed him AB. They showed him how to push the buttons and make choices, and he blinked when the machine took his orders. Possibilities dawned on him. He ran the whole range of what they wanted of him. I can read, he said, taking a chance, because of a sudden he saw himself using machines, like them, like what his name meant to him, being different than the others, and he suddenly, desperately, wanted not to be put out of this place. I'm born man, and I can read. I always could. That got frowns out of them, not smiles. They went outside the door and talked to each other while he sat with his shoulders aching from sitting and working so long and hoping that he had not done the wrong thing. A woman came into the room, one of them, in fine clothes. One of them, in fine clothes and smelling the way born men smelled in the base, in the tall buildings, of things other than dirt and smoke. You're going to stay the night, she said. You've done very well. We're going to make up more questions for you. He did not know why. He should have been relieved to know that he had done well. But there was his mother not knowing what might have happened, and he was 13 and not quite a man to know how to deal with this. But Base was authority, and he stayed. Their questions were not A and B. They involved himself and all the things he thought were right and wrong, and all the things he had ever heard. They asked them over and over again until his brain ached and he did what he had never done for anyone but his own mother. He broke down and cried, which broke something in him which had never been broken before. And even then they kept up their questions. He stilled his sobs and answered what they wanted, estimating that he had deserved this change in himself because he had wanted what no townsman had. The barrage kept up, and then they let him eat and rest. In the morning, or whatever time he woke, the building had no windows, they brought him to a room and put a needle in his arm so that he half slept, and a machine played facts into his awareness so that his mind went whirling into cold, dark distances, and the world into a different perspective. They taught him words for these things, and taught him what he was and what his world was. He wanted to go home when he waked from that. Your mother sent lunch for you, they told him kindly. She knows you're well. We explained you'll be staying a few more days before you come and go. He ate his mother's bread in this strange place, and his throat swelled while he swallowed, and the tears ran down his face without his even trying to stop them, or caring that they saw. He knew what they did to the children then. The children laughed and wrote words in the dust and hung about together, exempt from work because they had their hours in the base school. But he was no child, and if he went back into the town now, he would never be the man he had almost been. That thing in him which had broken would never quite repair itself, and what could he say in the town? I've seen the stars. I've touched. There are other worlds, and this one's shut because we're different, because we don't learn, because the town is what it is, and we're very, very small. He was quiet in his lessons, very quiet. He took his trank and listened to the tapes, having lost himself already. He gave up all that he had, hoping that they would make him over entirely, so that he could be what they were, because he had no other hope.
"You're very good," they said. "You're extremely intelligent."
This gave him what cheer he had. But his mother cried when he went back to her, quiet as he had become. It was the first time she had ever cried in front of him. She hugged him, sitting on the bed, which was the only place to sit in their small and shabby house, and held his face and looked in his eyes and tried to understand what he was becoming. She could not. That was part of his terror. "They give me credit at the store," he said, searching for something to offer her in place of himself. "You can have good clothes." She cleaned the house after, worked and worked and worked, as if she somehow imagined to herself the clean white place where he had been, as if she had fought back by that means. She washed all the clothes and washed the rough wood table and turned the straw mattresses, having beaten the dust out of them outside, and scrubbed the stone floor and got up and dusted even the tops of the rafters with a wet cloth to take away the dust. The Ariels, who sometimes came and went, dodged her scrubbing and finally stayed outside. And Dean carried water and helped until the neighbors stared, neighbors already curious what had happened. But when it was all still, it was only the old house all unnaturally clean, as if she had scrubbed it raw. And they ate together, trying to be mother and son. "They wanted to teach me to write," he said, "but I already knew. You taught me that."
"My dad taught me," she said, which he knew. "We're born men, just like them."
"They say I'm good." She looked up from her soup and met his eyes, just the least flicker of vindication.
"Course,"
she said. But he hedged all around the other things, like knowing what the world was. He was alone, with things dammed up inside he could never say. And they had asked him things no one talked about, like the old things, like the books they said the Hillers had. He had said these things not because he was innocent, but because he was afraid, because he was tired, because they wanted these things very, very badly, and he was afraid to lie. He sat across the rough table from his mother and ate his soup, afraid now to have her know how much of a stranger he had already become. Chapter 11.
"He's not a unionist," the science chief said. "The psych tests don't turn up much remnant of it. No political consciousness, nothing surviving in his family line."
"The mother's got title to a 2-bed house," security said, at the same long table in an upper level of the education facility. "Single. Always been single. Says the father's a Hiller and she doesn't know who."
"Different story from the boy," said education. "The father's got born man blood, he says, but he doesn't know who. We've interviewed the mother. She says the boy's got only her blood, and her father was a doctor. She's literate. She does some small medical work in the town, not getting rich at it. We give it away. She gets paid in a measure of flour. Hasn't done any harm at it." Remarkable woman. I'd suggest to bring her in for tests.
Might have her doing clinic work, the mission chief said. Good policy to reward the whole family.
We're forming a picture, the science chief said. If we could locate the books that are supposed to exist.
The constant rumor is, security said, that the Hillers have them, if they exist.
We don't press the Hillers. They'll run on us.
If there are literates among the Hillers, and books, Union materials, we do what we can, the mission chief said, short of a search which might drive the material completely underground. We know what the colony was. We know that the Calibans moved in on them. Something we did scared them off right enough. Maybe it was the noise of the shuttle. But somewhere the first colony lost control and cleared out of this place. Went to the hills. The Azzies stayed in town. The Dean line, a couple of others, trace back to the colonists. But there's a Hiller line among traders from one Ellie Flanahan, and a lot of Rogerses and Inneses and names that persist that aren't like Azzie names. Something turned most of the colonists to the hills, completely away from this site. The Azzie tended to stay, being Azzie. The flood hypothesis is out. Policy split is possible, but there's not much likelihood of it. The old camp seems to have been purposely stripped, just people moving out. And Calibans all over it, tunneled all under it. The earth movers sunk and near buried. That's Caliban damage, that's all.
We have a pretty good picture, Science said. It's far from complete. If there are records, if there was anything left but anomalies like this boy Dean...
We pull the town tighter in, the mission chief said. We continue the program while we have the chance.
Only with the town itself.
Militarily, security said, the only answer. We can't get the Hillers. Not without the town at a more secure level than it is. We can't ferret the Hillers out. Can't.
There's division of opinion on that.
I'm telling you the departmental consensus. I'm telling you the long-range estimate. We don't need hardened enemies on this world. We don't use the fist. The policy stands, the mission chief intervened, a calm voice and firm. The town first. We can't reach into the Hiller settlement. The Calibans. We just keep an eye on that movement. If the Caliban drift in our direction accelerates, then we take alarm.
The drift is there, Science said. The mounds exist a kilometer closer than last season.
Kille has a breeding cycle theory that makes a great deal of sense, that this advance and retreat has something to do with die-off.
We make theories at a distance, while the ban holds on first-hand observation.
We do what we can with the town, the mission chief said, before we take any action with the Calibans. We don't move until we're absolutely sure. Give me 1 sec here. I've got to check to see if the pages got flibble-flobbled. They didn't, I don't think. We're doing another time skip, though. Chapter 12. Year 89, Day 203, Colony Reckoning. Year 89, Day 203, Colony Reckoning. Stickside. They were born men and townsmen, and they came up the river with a great deal of noise, a sound of hard-soled boots and breaking of branches, and sometimes splashing where a stream fed into the sticks. Jin was amazed and squatted on a rock to see, because there had never in his lifetime come such a thing. People from inside the barrier come from behind their fences and down the sticks. They saw him there, and some of them aimed their guns from fright. Jin's heart froze in him from shock, and he moved no muscle until the senior-most of them waved the guns away and stopped the rest of the column in the kind of order townsmen liked. "You," the man said. "Hiller?" Jin nodded, squatting on his rock, his eyes still alert for small movements of weapons. He had his arms about his leather-clad knees, but there was brush beside him, and he could bound away with one fast spring if they went on being crazy. "You got your number, Hiller?" Jin made a pursing of his lips, his eyes very much alert. "Got no number, born man. I hunt. I don't trade behind your wire." The man came a little closer, looking up at him on his rock. "We're not behind the wire now. Don't need a number. Want to trade?" "Trade what?" "You know Caliban's, Hiller?" Jin half lidded his eyes. "Oh, so Caliban's. Don't touch 'em, born man. The old Browns, they don't take much to hunters, or strangers come walking along the sticks." "We're here to study," another man said, leaving the others to come closer. He was an older man with gray hair. "To learn the Calibans. Not to learn the Calibans. Not to hunt." "Huh." Jin laughed Hiller fashion, short and soft. "The old Browns don't fancy being learned. You make tapes, old born man. You make tapes to teach you Calibans. They go away from you long time ago. Now you want them back? They make your buildings fall. They drag you under, old born man, take you down with them, down in the dark underground." "I'll go up there," a young man said, but "No," the old man said. "He's all right. I want to hear him. Hiller, what's your name?" "Jin. What's yours?" "Spencer. You mind if I come up there?" "Sir." "Sir," the man said, with the weapons. But the old man was coming up the side of the rocky slope, and Jin considered it and let him, amused as the old born man squatted down Hiller fashion facing him. "You know a lot about them," Spencer said. Jin shrugged, not displeased at respect. "You hunt them?" Spencer asked. "You wear their hides?" "Grays," Jin said, rubbing his leather-clad knee. "Not the Browns." "What's the difference?" It was a stupid question. Jin studied the old man, conceived an outrageous idea, because it was a pleasant old face, a comfortable face, on this slightly fat man with wrinkled skin and fine cloth clothes. Fat was prosperity, just enough. An important man who climbed up a rock and sat with a young hunter. Jin grinned, waved a dismissing hand. "You tell the rest of them go home. They make too much noise. I take you upriver." "I can't do that." "Make the Calibans mad, the noise." "That noise." "Make the Calibans mad, that noise. You want to see, I show you." Ah, the old man wanted the bargain. He saw it in the eyes, pale, pale blue, the palest, most wonderful blue he ever saw. And the old man got down off his rock and went to the armed young leader and argued in harder and harder words. "You can't do that," the young man said. "You turn them around," the old one said, "and you report how it was." In the end, they each got half, because the old man was going on and the rest were waiting here. "Not far," Jin said easily. He bounced down off his rock, a soft landing on soft-soled boots, and straightened with a nod to the old man in the way that they should go. "He hasn't made a deal," the armed man said. "Dr. Spencer, he's no townsman. We've got no number on him." "Maybe if you had," Spencer said, "he wouldn't be any good out here." The armed man said nothing. Jin motioned to the old one. It was a lark. He was fascinated by these people he had never seen so close at hand, in their fine cloth and hard boots. He reckoned this man for someone, not just a townsman, but from the buildings where no one got, not even townfolk, and least of all Hillers. and never a hunter who had no number on his hand for passing the fences and going and coming into the Born Man territory. "Come on," he said to the old man Spencer. "You give me a shirt, all right?" He knew that such folk must be rich. "I show you Calibans." The old man came with him, walking splay-footed down the bank, shifting the straps of all sorts of things he carried. Flitters dived and splashed among the reeds, and the old man puffed on, making noise even in walking, a helpless sort in the way no hiller child was helpless. I could rob this man, Jin thought, just because robbery did happen, high in the hills, but it was a kind of thought that came just because he thought it was trusting of the old man to be carrying all that wealth and going off with a stranger who was stronger and quicker and knew the land, and he was wondering whether the old man knew people robbed each other, or whether inside the camp such things never happened. He found the Calibans where he knew to find them, not so very far as they had been a hand of years ago. Even aerials were more plentiful, a lacery of trails across the sandy margin. Ariels, greys, even browns had turned up hereabouts, and all the lesser sorts. The hangers about. It was a rich season, a fat season. "Look," he said, and pointed, showing the old man a ripple amid the sticks, where the broad, marshy water reflected back the trees and cloudy sky. The old man stopped and gaped, trying to make out Calibans, but there was no seeing that one clearly. It was fishing, and need not come up. They kept walking around the next bank, where mounds rose up on all sides of them, and trees thrust their roots in to drink from the dark hollows. It was forest now, and only leaves rustled. "They're all about us," he told the man, and the man started violently and batted at a flitter, which chanced at that moment to land on his neck. The startlement made Jin laugh. "Listen," Jin said, and squatted down so the old man squatted too, and paid attention when he pointed across the water among the trees. "Over there, across the water, that's theirs. That's theirs all the way to the salt water, as far as a man can walk. They're smart, those Calibans." "Some of you live in there. I've heard so. Could I talk with one?" Jin's skin prickled up. He looked toward the safe side of the river, toward familiar things. "Tell you something, old Born Man. You don't talk to them. You don't talk about them." "Bad people?" Jin shrugged, not wanting to discuss it. "Want a Caliban? I can whistle one." "They're dangerous, aren't they?" "So is everyone. Want one?" He did not wait, but gave out a low warble, knowing what it would do. And very quickly, because he knew a guard had been watching all this tramping about near the mound, a Caliban put its head up out of the bushy entrance, and a good deal more of Caliban followed. He heard a tiny sound by him, a whirring kind of thing. He shot out a hand at the machinery the man carried. "Don't do that. Don't make sounds." It stopped at once. "They pick that up. You just don't make sounds. It's big." Children said that when they first saw the old Browns. Jin pursed his lips again, amused. "Seen enough, old Born Man. Beyond here's his, and no arguing that." "But the humans, that go inside, is it wrong to talk about that? Do you trade with them?" He shook his head ever so slightly. "They live, is all. Eat fish." Above them, on the ridge, the Caliban raised its crest, flicked out a tongue. That was enough. "Time to move, Born Man." "That's a threat." "No, that's wanting." He heard something, knew with his ears what it was coming up in the brush, grabbed the Born Man's sleeve to take him away. But the weird crouched there, all long-haired and smeared with mud, head and shoulders above the brush. And the Born Man refused to move. "Come on," Jin said urgently. "Come on." Out of the tail of his eye, in the river, a ripple was making its way toward them. The man made his machinery work once more, briefly. There's another one. There's too many, Born Man. Let's move." He was relieved when the man lurched to his feet and came with him. Very quietly they hurried out of the place, but the old man turned and looked back when the splash announced the arrival of the swimmer on the shore.
Would they attack?
The born man asked.
Sometimes they do and sometimes not. The man back there,
They're trouble, is all. Sometimes they're trouble. The old man panted a little, making better speed with all his load.
what do you want with Calibans?
Jin asked.
Curious,
The old man said. He made good time, the two of them going along at the same pace.
that's following us.
Jin tracked the old man's glance at the river, saw the ripples.
That's so.
I can hurry, the old man offered.
Not wise. Just walk.
He kept an eye to it, and knowing Calibans, to the woods as well. He imagined small sounds, or perhaps did not imagine them, but they ceased when they had come close to the curve of the river where the rest of the born men waited. They were nervous. They got up from sitting on their baggage and had their guns in their hands. Out in the river the ripples stopped, beyond the reeds, in the deep part.
They're there,
the old man said to the one in charge of the others.
got some data. They're stirred up some. Let's be walking back.
Got a shirt owed me, Jin reminded them, hands on hips, standing easy, but he reckoned not to be cheated.
Hobbs.
The old man turned to the younger, and there was some ado while one of the men took off his shirt and passed it over. The old man gave it to Jin, who looked it over and found it sound enough.
Jin, I might like to talk with you. Might like you to come to town and talk.
Ah. Jin tucked his shirt under his arm and backed off. You don't put any mark on me. No, you don't, born man.
Get you a special kind of paper so you can come and go through the gates. No number on you, I promise. You know a lot, Jin. You'd find it worth your time. Not just one shirt. Real pay, town scale.
He stopped backing, thinking on that. And then a splash and a brown came up. And just then a splash, and a brown came up through the reeds, water sliding off its pebbly hide. It came up all the way on its legs. Someone shot. It lurched and hissed and came. No! Jin yelled at them, running, which was the wise thing. But they shot with the guns, and it hissed and whirled and flattened reeds in its entry into the river. The ripples spread and vanished in the sluggish current. It went deep. Jin crouched on his rock and hugged himself with dire, cold feeling at his gut. There was nothing Jesus. It went deep. Jin crouched on his rock and hugged himself with a dire, cold feeling at his gut. There was shouting among the folk. The old man shouted at the younger, and the younger at the others, but there was a great quiet in the world. It was a brown, Jin said. The old man looked up at him, looking as if he of all of them halfway understood. Go away now, Jin said. Go away fast.
I want to talk with you.
I'll come to your gate, old born man, when I want. Go away. Look, the younger man said.
Let's go,
the old man said, and there was authority in his voice. The folks with guns gathered up all that was theirs and went away down the shore. The bent place stayed in the reeds, and Jin watched until they had gone out of sight around the bend, until the bank was whole again. A sweat gathered on his body. He stared at the gray light on the sticks, trying to see ripples, hoping for them. But brush whispered. He stood up slowly, on his rock, faced in the direction of the sound. Two of the weirds stood there, with the rags of garments that weirds affected, their deathly pale skins streaked with mud about hands and knees. Their backs were to the upriver. Their shadowed eyes rested on him, and he grew very cold, reckoning he was about to die. There was nowhere to run but the born men's wire. The Hiller village could never hide him, and he would die of other reasons if he was shut away behind the wire and numbered. One weird lifted his head only slightly, a gesture he took for a summons. He might cause them trouble. He was minded to. But somewhere, not so far away and not in sight either, would be another of them, or two, or three. They would move if he denied them. So he leapt down from his rock and came closer to the weirds as they seemed to want. They parted, opening a way for him to go, and a quiet panic settled into him, because he understood then that they intended to bring him back with them upriver. Desperately he looked leftward, toward the sticks, toward the gray sunlight mirrored among the reeds, hoping against all expectation that the brown the born men had shot would surface. No, it was gone. Dead, hurt, no one might know. A gentle hand took his elbow, ever so gently tugging at him, directing him where he had to go if he had any hope to live. He went, retracing the track he and the old man had followed, and now the weirds held him by either arm. The one on his left deftly reached and relieved him of his belt knife. He could not understand how they moved him, or why he did not break and run. Only the death about him was instant. And what was ahead was indefinite, holding some small chance. There was no reckoning with the weirds or with the browns. There was no understanding. They might bring him back to the mounds and then, as capriciously, let him go. The turns of the sticks unwound themselves until the sky's shining sheet was dimmed in the shade of trees, until they reached the towering ridges and the tracks he and the old man had made when they had stopped. Perhaps they would hold him here, and the old brown would come out and eye him as Caliban's would, and lose interest as Caliban's would, and they would let him go. No. They urged him up the slope of the mound toward the dark entryway in the side of it, and he refused, bolted suddenly out of their hands and down among the brush at the right, breaking twigs and thorns on his leather clothing, shielding his face with his arms. A hiss broke in front of him, and the head of a great brown loomed up, jaws gaping. He skidded to a stop, slapped instinctively at a sharp sting on his cheek, and felt a dart fall from under his fingers. The brown in front of him turned its head to regard him with one round golden eye, while he felt that side of his face numb, his heart speeding. His extremities lost feeling, his knees buckled. He flung up an arm to protect his eyes as brush came up at him, and lacked the strength to move when he landed among the thorny branches. They were all about him, the human shapes, silent. Gentle hands tugged at him, turning him onto his back, so that a lacery of cloudy sky and branches swung into his vision. He was not dying. He was numb, so that they could gather him up and carry him, but he was not dead when they carried him toward the hole in the earth, and realizing this, he tried to fight, in a terror deeper than all his nightmares. But he could not move, not the least twitch of a finger, not even to close his eyes when dirt fell into his face, not to close his mouth or swallow or use his tongue, even to cry out when the dark went around him, and he was alone with them, with their silence and their touches. Chapter 13. Year 89, Day 208, Colony Reckoning. Main Base.
"No sign of this Hiller," Spencer said. "No, sir," Dean said, hands behind him. Oh, that's Dean. "No, sir," Dean said, hands behind him. Spencer frowned, turned from his table, fully facing Dean, an intense young man, his assistant, with a shock of thick black hair and a coppery skin tone and a faded blue number on his hand that meant townsman, at least intermittently. Presently, Dean was doing field work, meaning he was back in town again. "How did you hunt for him?" Spencer asked. "Asking other Hillers, those who came to trade. They haven't seen him." "They know him?" Dean took the liberty and sat down on the other stool, at the slanted desk full of reports, pulled it under him. He smelled of recent soap, never of the fields. Meticulous in that.
He had ambitions, Spencer reckoned. He was good in what they let him do. Name's known, yes. There's a kind of split. I don't pick up all of it. I've given you notes on that. At any rate, there was this very old Azzy. You want his history?
Might be pertinent.
The last Azzy survivor. His brood went for the hills. That's the ancestry. You hear about that line, but you don't see them. None of them are registered to come into the camp. There's an order among hillers. The ones we get around here, they'll talk easy on some things. But I didn't get an easy feeling asking about this fellow Jin.
How not easy?
A shrug. Like first it was no townsman's business. Like second, that maybe this particular hiller wouldn't be dealing with a townsman.
How did you put it to them?
Just that I had come on something that had to do with this Jin. I thought it was clever. After all, his ancestor was hereabouts. And it used to be that townsmen would trade found things to the hills. I didn't say anything more than that. They might get curious. But this man's a bush hiller. It could be a while.
Meaning he might be out of their settlement and out of touch.
Meaning that, likely. It seemed to be a good bit of gossip. I imagine it'll go on quick feet. But no news yet. You mind if I ask what I'm looking for? Spencer clamped his lips together, thinking on it, reached then and dragged a set of pictures down from the clutter on the desk, arranged them in front of Dean.
That's the sticks.
I see that, Dean said. Spencer frowned and enlivened the wall screens, played the tape loop that was loaded in the machine. He had seen the tape a score of times, studied it, frame by frame. Now he watched Dean's face instead, saw Dean's face go rigid in the light of the screen, seeing the Caliban and then the human come out of the mound. Dean's whole body gave back, hands on the edge of the tabletop.
Bother you?
Dean looked toward him as the tape looped round again. Spencer cut the machine off. Dean straightened with a certain nonchalance. Not particularly. Calibans. But someone got real close to do that tape.
Not so far upriver. Look at the orbiting survey.
Spencer marked the place, difficult to detect under the general canopy of trees. Dean looked up, without the nonchalance. This have to do with the hiller you're looking for, by any chance?
It might.
You take these?
You're full of questions.
That's where you and the soldiers went, upriver last week, looking for Calibans.
Might be.
This hunter, this Jin, he was there? He guided you?
You don't like the sound of it.
Dean bit at his lip. Not a good idea to go up on Calibans like that. Not a good idea at all.
Let me show you something else.
Spencer pulled a tide of pictures down the slope of the desk.
Try those.
Dean turned and sorted through them, frowning.
You know what you're looking at?
The world, Dean said, seen from orbit.
Pictures of what?
A long silence, a shuffling of pictures. Rivers. Rivers all over the world. I don't know their names. And the sticks.
And?
A long silence. Dean did not look around.
Caliban patterns, Spencer said. You see them?
Yes.
Want to show you something more.
Spencer found the aerial shot of the Hiller village, thatched huts and stone walls, winding walls, walls that bent and curved. He put a shot of the base and town and fields next to it, a checkerboard geometry.
Don't you find something remarkable in that? Have you ever seen it?
Dean sat still, his eyes only on the pictures under his hands. I think any townsman would tend to understand that.
How do you mean?
The founders laid out the town streets. Hillers made the Hiller village.
Why didn't they make it? Why didn't they make it like the town?
Because they don't like to do things like us. Spirals are like them. Maybe they got it from the Calibans. I figure they did. They do spirals sometimes, like in the dust. You talk with them to trade.
They squat down and draw when they don't like much what you're telling them. I don't think I've ever seen a Hiller do that.
Wouldn't.
What's that supposed to mean?
Like when you send me out to ask things Hillers won't say when you ask it. Like when a Hiller's dealing with somebody in base clothes, it's one way, and when it's a townsman, that Hiller's more or less hard to Ah, jeez, frickadoodle. My lips are dying on me. Like when you send me...
What's that supposed to mean?
Like when you send me out to ask things Hillers won't say when you ask it. When you... Like when you send me out to ask things Hillers won't say when you ask it. Like when a Hiller's dealing with somebody in base clothes, it's one way, and then when it's a townsman, And then when it's a townsman, that Hiller's more or less hard to deal with. More or less hard to deal with. They price you way high if they think they can, but they don't give you the eye. They don't do Hiller tricks when they bargain, like spitting in the dirt, like looking off, like writing patterns.
Patterns? What patterns?
Spirals. Like two of them squatting down in the dirt and letting the dust run out of their hands or drawing with their fingers. One does one thing and one does a bit on it while they're thinking over a deal. And then they make you think they've forgotten you're standing there. But maybe they're talking to each other that way. Maybe it's nothing at all. That's why they do it. Because we won't know. And we're supposed to wonder. Spencer sat and stared at him so long that Dean finally looked his way. Somehow that never got into your reports. I never thought it was much. It's all show.
Is it?
Spencer pulled two more pictures from the lot, one of an Eastern Hemisphere river, one from the North Shore, a mosaic going toward the sea, including all the effluents of the Styx, and the base and both town and Hiller settlement. He pointed out the places, the encroachment of the Calibans toward the sea on the far side of the river, the faint shadowing at the end of the ridges.
They're different. The spirals of Calibans everywhere in the world, but here, are looser. They don't make hills. See the shadow cast from the centers, here, here, and here? That's a tall structure. That's a peak in the center of those spirals. Let me get you a close-up.
He searched and pulled another out that showed the structure, a spiral winding into a miniature mountain, slid that in front of Dean.
You understand what I'm saying now? Only here. Only across from the base. Is that a Caliban structure?
How big is that?
The complex is 1 kilometer wide. The peak is 40 meters wide at base to the most extreme slope and 20 high. Have you ever seen the like?
Dean shook his head. No. He glanced up. But then I've never seen a Caliban, except the pictures.
They didn't like sharing the base. They moved out.
But they're moving back. On the river. Your pictures. You won't get that hunter to go across the Styx, if that's what you're thinking. I don't think you will. I don't think you ought to push that to Hillers where it regards Calibans.
Why?
A shrug. I just don't think you should.
That's not the kind of answer you draw your pay for.
I think it's dangerous. I think the Hillers could get anxious. The Calibans are already close. They won't like them stirred up, that's what.
They hunt them?
Another shrug. They trade in leather, but there's Calibans and Calibans. Different types.
The browns.
The browns and the grays.
What's the difference?
A third shrug. Hillers hunt grays. They know.
Know what?
Whatever they know. Whatever they know. I don't.
There was this Caliban, Spencer said carefully. We'd been up to the mound to take those pictures, this Jinn and I, alone, and we got back to the troops, and this Caliban came out of the river. They shot it, and it slid back in. It was a brown, the hunter said, like that, and then go away fast. What do you make of that?
Dean just stared a moment, dead-faced the way he would when something bothered him. Did you?
We left.
I reckon he did, too. Fast and far as he could. He won't come to your gate, no.
Meaning? meaning he's going to be scared a long, long time. He'll never come to you.
Would he be that afraid?
He'd be that afraid.
Of what? Of Calibans? Or weirds?
A blink of the dark eyes. Whatever it was worth being afraid of. Hillers would know. I don't. But don't go out there. Don't send the soldiers outside the wire, not another time.
I'm afraid I don't make that decision.
Tell them.
I'll do that, Spencer said, frowning. You don't think the search is worthwhile, do you?
You won't find him.
Keep your ears open.
I'd thought about sleeping in my own quarters tonight.
I'd rather you stayed in the town. Just keep listening.
For what?
Hiller talk. All of it. What if I offered you a bonus to go outside the wire?
Dean shook his head warily. No, I don't do that.
Townsmen have gone to the hills before.
No.
Meaning you won't. Suppose we put a high priority on that.
Dean sat very still. Townsmen know I'm from inside. Hillers may be stirred up right now. And if they are, and if they knew where I came from...
You mean you think they'd kill you?
I don't know what they'd do.
All right, we'll think about that. Just go back to the town and listen where you can.
All right. Dean got up, walked as far as the door, looked back. He looked as if he would like to say something more, but walked away. Spencer stared at his pictures, ran the loop again. Calibans had tried the wire last night down by the river. They had never done that, not since Alliance came to the world. There had to be precautions. Chapter 14. Year 89, Day 208, Colony Reckoning. Stickside. He might be mad, or he wished he were, in the dark, in the silence broken only by slitherings and breathings, and sometimes, when his sanity had all it could bear, He might be mad, or he wished he were, in the dark, in the silence broken only by slitherings and breathings, and sometimes, when his sanity had had all it could bear, by his screams and sobs. His screaming could drive them back a while, but they would be back. They put no restraint on him. They needed none but the darkness and the earth, the hard-packed earthen walls that he could feel and not see in the absolute and lasting night. His fingers were torn and maybe bleeding. He had tried to dig his way to safety, even to dig himself a niche in which to put his back, so that he could defend himself when they came at him, but he had no sense which way the outside was, or how deep they had taken him. He might be trying to dig through the hills themselves. He found a rock once, and battered one of his attackers with it, but they used their needles and had their revenge for that a long, long time. Like the times he had tried to crawl away, feeling his blind way through the dark, until he had ended with the hissing blast of a Caliban's breath in his face, the quick scrabble of claws, the thrusting of a great blunt nose that knocked him off his feet. Lying there with a great clawed foot bearing down on his ribs and throat until human hands arrived with needles, or running into such hands direct. No, there was no fighting them. He did not know why he did not die. He thought about it, young as he was, and thought he could smother himself in the earth, that he could dig himself a grave with his lacerated fingers and hide his face in it, and stop his breathing with dirt. He dug, but they always came when they heard him digging. He was sure that they heard. So he kept still. They brought him raw fish to eat, and water to drink which might or might not be clean. At such times they touched him, constant touches, like the nagging of children, and then more than other times he thought of dying, mostly because feeding was the one thing they did to keep life in him. He was always cold. Mud caked on his clothes and his skin, dry and wet by turns, wherever in the earthen maze they had moved him last. His hair was matted with filth.
His clothes were torn, laces snapped with his struggles, and he tried to knot them back together because he was cold, because clothes were all the protection he had. He lay still, finally, weaker than he had begun, with druggings and struggles and food that sometimes his stomach heaved up or that his body rejected in cramping spasms, and even his condition did not repulse the females among them, who tormented him with some result at the beginning, when it took all of them, sealing up the exits and herding and hunting him through the narrow dark, and hauling him down with weight of numbers. But they got nothing from him now, nothing but a weary misery, terror that they might kill him in their frustration. That was what he had sunk to. But they were always silent, gave him no hint of humor or anger or whether they were themselves quite mad. He was himself passing over some manner of brink. He even knew this, in a far recess of his mind where his self survived. If he were set out again on the riverside, he thought of Styx as the outside, having lost all touch with the sunny hills. If he were set outside to see the daylight again, the sun on the water, the reeds in the wind, if he were free, he did not think he would laugh again, or take sunlight for granted. He would never be a man again in the narrow sense of man, because sex had not gone dead in him, but become personless, unimportant, or, in the wider sense, because he had been gutted, spread wide, to take into his empty insides all the darks and slitherings under earth. Let me try that again. He would never be a man again in the narrow sense of man, because sex had not gone dead in him, but become personless, unimportant, or, in the wider sense, because he had been gutted, spread wide, to take into his empty insides all the darks and slitherings under earth, all the madness and the windings underground. He felt this happening, or realized it had happened, and finally knew that this was why he had not died, that he had reached a point past which he had more interest in this darkness, the sounds, the slitherings, than he had in life. It had all begun to give him information. His mind received 1,000 clues in the midst of its terror, grew tired of terror, and concentrated on the clues. They came for him. He thought it might be food when he heard them, but food smelled, and he caught no such smell, so he knew that it was himself they wanted, and he lay quite still, his heart speeding a little, but his mind reasoning that it was only inconvenience, a little pain to get through like all the other pains, and after that he would still be alive, and still thinking, which was something still more promising than dying was. But they gathered about him, a great lot of them by the sounds, and jabbed him with one of their needles. He screamed, outraged by that trick, suddenly wild as a Caliban could go. Suddenly wild as a Caliban could go. Much better. He struck at them, but they skipped silently out of reach. Something slithered across his chill-numbed legs, and that was an Ariel, who ran where they liked in the mounds. He struck at it with a shudder, but it eluded him. Then he sat still, waiting while the numbness crept over him, while his mouth seemed full of fluff and his extremities went dead. They gathered him up then, feeling over his body to be sure which way he was lying, dragged at his wrists to take him through the narrow tunnel, while he was as paralyzed as he had been when they brought him into this place. His mind still worked. He wished that they would turn him over on his belly because dirt fell into his eyes. Then there began to be daylight, and they were going up, and out of the tunnel into the glaring sun. Light crossed his eyes like a knife, brought tears, and vanished again in a whirl of leaves, living and dead, as one of them slung him up over his shoulder. They passed him then to another, who did not support him, but held him about the chest, and dragged him into the river. The shock of water got to him. He tried again to move, to throw his head, to at least get air, but a hand cupped his chin, and the water took all but his face, and sometimes washed over him.
He choked, incapable of moving his limbs. He choked, incapable of moving as his limbs dragged through the water. Terror grew too much then. The senses dimmed from want of air, from the hammering of his heart. And then they were hauling him out on the other side, and took up his sodden, leather-clad body sideways, while his head fell lowest, and a spasm of his throat and stomach sent up a thin stream of choking fluid. His limbs took on a little life, a slight degree of response, but now they dragged him up again. Oh my gosh, give me a sec. Sorry about that. Where were we? He convulsed once, a spasm which emptied out his stomach, lay still in shallow breathing when it had passed. I think I stopped before that. His limbs took on a little life, a slight degree of response, but now they dragged him up again, pulling him up a brushy mound on the opposite side of the river, and the dark took them all back again. He convulsed once, a spasm which emptied out his stomach, lay still in shallow breathing when it had passed, and the hands which had let him go, when he doubled up, took him again by the wrists and collar, and by the knees, carrying him in a rapid jolting through the dark. He heard a sound, a faint protest from his own throat, and stopped it, silent as this whole world was silent. He had lain for unguessable time in the dark learning the rules, and now they stripped all the rules away. He was truly gone now. The paralysis of his body had receded to a kind of numbness, but he failed to do anything to help himself, blind, completely blind, and fainting for long black periods hardly distinguishable from his waking in the dark, except that the fainting was without pain, and that such periods were gratefully frequent. They stopped, finally. He thought perhaps that they had gotten to some place which satisfied them, and that they might go away and let him lie, which was all he wanted. But they stayed. He heard their panting breaths close by, and the small movements they made. He heard the skittering of aerials and the slither of one of the Calibans in the vast silence. Perhaps, he thought, they meant him some harm when they had rested. Maybe they were renegades or crazier than the rest, with a notion to have privacy for their sport. He meant to fight them if it got to that, make them stick him again, because that brought him numbness. One moved, and the others did, fingering him with their blind touches. He struck once, but they got his arms and legs and simply picked him up again, having had their rest. He knew what they could do, and he had no desire for the needle under those terms, and even made feeble attempts to cooperate when they had come to a low place, so that finally it seemed to get through to them that he would go with them on his own. More and more they let him carry himself for brief periods, taking him up when he would stumble, when his exhaustion was too extreme. And then there was a confusion in the dark, a meeting, he thought, and a different smell about those they met. And then there was a confusion in the dark, a meeting, he thought, and a different smell about those they met. He was pushed forward, let go, taken again, and after that snatched up again, so that he knew he was in different hands. Tears leaked from his eyes. The others had understood something. He had gotten something through to the others to better his condition, and they changed the game again, snatched him off and hauled him along with more roughness than before. He went limp and let them do what they liked, afraid of needles, afraid of utter helplessness.
Such strength as he had left in him he saved, that being the only canniness he had left. They climbed. He gathered his mind from the far corners of its retreat and tried to think again, getting information again. Ascent, spirals, dry earth, and light. He tried to lift his head from its backward tilt, could not hold it, watched the light grow in his upside-down vision, making a hazy silhouette of the man who had his arms. An earthen chamber with light coming from a window. A man sitting on the floor, another shadow in his hazed vision. They let him down. He lay there a moment, frozen in the silence of them, turned his head to the seated man. One of their own, but old, the oldest man he had ever seen, bald and withered and clothed in a one-shouldered robe that held at least the memory of red. The others squatted in their rags. The old man sat and waited. It was a time before he gathered up his wits at all. He levered himself up on his arm, squinted up at the light as the silhouette of a weird set a large bowl of water in front of him. He bent and cupped up water to drink and wash the sickness from his mouth, drank again and again, and splashed clean water. I lost my spot. He bent and cupped up water to drink and wash the sickness from his mouth, drank again and again, and splashed clean water over his face while his hands shook and spilled a lot of it in his lap. He blinked at the old man, having gotten used to insanity and expecting more. He blinked at the old man, having gotten used to insanity and expecting more of it. "Speak," the old man said softly. A rock might have spoken. The old man sat. A smallish aerial rested in his lap. His fingers played with it, stroking its ruffled fringes. Jin needed time to consider. He wiped his face yet again, drew his knee up and rested his arm on it because he was not yet steady even sitting. He looked at the old man very long. "Why am I here?" he asked finally, as still, as hushed. But the old man did not answer, as crazed as the rest of them. Or that was not the speech the old man wanted. The silence between them went on, and Jin hugged his knee against him to keep from shaking. There was warmth here. It streamed through the window, circulated with the air. Summer went on outside as if it had never stopped. "They found me by the river," Jin said then, precisely, carefully, in a voice hardly more than a whisper. He recalled the shooting of the Caliban and blocked that from his mind, focusing narrowly on the old man in front of him, whose skull was naked of hair, whose thin beard was white and clean. Clean. He never thought to see cleanliness again. He reeked of mud and sweat and excrement. His clothes were caked with filth. "It must have been days ago." He went on talking, reckoning for the first time that someone was listening to him. "They brought me across the river. I don't know why." "Name?" "Jin." The aged head lifted. Watery dark eyes focused on his for a long and quiet time. "My name is Green." The name hit his mind and settled, a cold, cold feeling. Family stories. They knew each other. He saw that. "Let me go," he said. "Let me out of here." "Someday," Green whispered, a rusty sound like something long unused. A long silence. "A Brown is dead." "An accident. No one meant it."
Green simply stared, then took pebbles from his lap and placed them in a line on the earthen floor. The Ariel watched, then scrambled over his knee and onto the hard-packed earth, a flailing of limbs. It stood up on its legs, flicked its collar, studying the matter with one cocked eye. Then it began to move the pebbles, laying them in a heap. "Let me leave," Jin said hoarsely, focusing with difficulty. "It was an accident." "Do you understand the pattern?" "No, sorry, this pattern." "Do you understand this pattern?" Green asked. "No," he answered himself, and gathered up the stones, laid them down again, only to have the Ariel move them into a heap. It went on and on. "What do you want with me?" Jin asked at last. A tremor had started in his arms, exhaustion, and a pain in his gut. "Can't we get it done?" "Look at this place," Green said. He lifted his eyes and looked around him, the earthen walls, the window, the rammed earth floor scored with claws far larger than the Ariel's. The weirds crouched in shadow beneath the window. Green clapped his hands, twice, echoing in the stillness. And far away, down somewhere in the shadows, something stirred. There was a sough of breath, and that something was large. Jin froze, his arms locked about his knees. He looked at the window, at sunlight, at a way of escaping or dying. "No hurt," Green said softly. It came up from below, a woof of breath, a dry scraping of claws, the thrusting of a blunt, bony-colored head up and out of the entry to the room, a head as large as the entry itself. Jin scrambled back until he felt the wall behind him, and more of it kept coming, a brown, but a bigger brown than ever he had seen. Its eyes were green gold. Its crest was touched with green. It settled on its belly, curling its tail around the curving of the wall beyond Green. With a capital G, the guy, reaching from side to side of the room, and the weirds never stirring from where they sat. The brown craned its neck, turned a fist-sized pupil in Jin's direction, came up on its legs, and moved closer. Jin shut his eyes, felt warm breath and the flickering of its tongue about his face and throat. The tongue withdrew. The head turned again to stare at him with an eye large as a human head. The tongue licked out, thick as his arm. "Be calm," Green whispered. Jin hugged against the wall beside huge clawed feet. The head swung over him, overshadowing him, and quietly it bent and nudged him with its jaws. He cried out. It whipped away, dived down into the dark of the access with a last slithering of its tail. Jin stayed where he was against the wall, shivering. "Others died," Green whispering, sitting again where he had sat, calmly placing his stones one after the other. "No," the stones said, chilling with hope. Green gathered up the stones again, strewed them one after the other, went on doing this time after time while the Ariel crouched near and watched, while the rougher, ragged weirds crouched watching in their silence. Jin wiped his mouth and grew quieter, the shivers periodic. He was not dead. He had not died. There was an anger stored away inside him, anger at what he was, that he could not stop shivering, because they could do whatever they liked.
He remembered what he had suffered, and how he had screamed, and how all his wit and hunter's skill had let him down. He no longer liked being what he had been, vulnerable. He would never be again what he had been, naive. All his people must have seen these things in him, or all his kind were like him. He loathed himself with a deep and dawning rage. Chapter 15. Year 89, Day 222, Colony Reckoning, Main Base. Dean came into the lab, stood, hands behind him, coughed finally when Spencer stayed at work. Spencer turned around.
Morning,
Spencer said.
Morning, sir.
He kept his pose, less than easy, and Spencer frowned at him.
Something wrong, Dean.
I heard.
Is this panic all over the town, then?
The soldiers moved last night, to the wire.
An alarm, an empty one.
Hillers haven't shown up in days.
So I understand.
Spencer came closer, rested his portly body against the counter, and leaned back, arms folded.
You here to say something in particular, Dean?
Just that.
Well, I appreciate your report. I reckon the Hillers are a little nervous, that's all.
I don't know what I can learn out there in town if there aren't any Hillers coming in.
I think you serve a purpose.
I'd really like to be assigned inside.
You're not nervous, are you?
I just really think I'm not serving any purpose out there.
It's rather superstitious, isn't it? I detect that in the town.
They're quite large, sir, the Calibans.
I think you serve as a stabilizing influence in the town. You can tell them that the station's still up there watching and we don't anticipate any movement. It's probably due to some biocycle. Fish, maybe, availability of food, population pressures. You're an educated man, Dean, and I want you right where you are. We've got a dozen applications for base residency in our hands, a rush on applications for one open job. That disturbs me more than the Calibans. We've got a whole flood of field workers on the sick roster. I'm talking 20% of the workers. Not a fever in the lot. No. We're not pulling you inside. You stay out until the crisis is over.
That could be a while, Dr. Spencer.
You do your job. You keep it down out there. You want your privileges, you do your job, you hear me? No favors. You talk to key people and you keep the town quiet.
Yes, Dean said. Sir.
He jammed his hands into his pockets and nodded a good morning, trying to manage his breathing while he turned and walked out. His mother was dead last month. The meds had not saved her this time. The heart had just gone. The townhouse was empty except when he moved in. His neighbors hardly spoke, coveting the house so conveniently sharing a wall with their overcrowded one. He had no friends. Older than the adolescent scholars, he was an anomaly in his generation. He had no wife or lover. Being native and untouchable on the main base side of the line, outsider and unwanted in the town. He walked the quadrangle of base, among the tall outworlder buildings, among strange concrete gardens which disturbed him to look at, because they made no sense in their forms of twisted concrete, and he saw obscure comparisons to patterns, which Hillers made to confuse townsmen. Just beyond the enclosure made by the buildings and their concrete walls, he entered the gatehouse, where he stripped and hung his base clothes in a locker, and changed to townsman coveralls, drab and worn. They were a lie, or the other clothes were. He was not, this morning, sure.
He went out again, past the guard who knew him, the outworlder guard who looked at him and never smiled, never trusted him, always checked at the tags and the number on his hand as if they had changed since yesterday. The guard made his note in the record that he had left the base. Dean went out, from concrete garden to a concrete track that led into the town, making a T north and south, one long true street which was all the luxury the town had. The rest were dirt. The buildings were native stone and brick, and the clinic, which was featureless concrete, that was the other gift from base. Dirt streets and ordinary houses raised by people who had forgotten architects and engineers. They had a public tap on every street, a public sewer to take the slops, and a law to make sure people took the trouble. There was a public bath, but that stank of its drains, and kept the ground around it muddy, to track in and out. There were fields as far as the hills, golden at this time of year, and the sentry towers, and the wire about the fields, about the town, and concrete ramparts and guard stations about the base. The wire made them safe. So the Outworlders said. Chapter 16. Let me make sure, because there is one of these that I have to switch over from. Yes, okay, I know, and I'll do that. Very good. I have another couple pages. Chapter 16, Year 89, Day 223, Colony Reckoning. The Hiller Village. A Caliban came at twilight, carrying a rider, a thing no one had ever seen. It came gliding out of the brush near Old Tom's house, and another one came after it. A small girl saw it first and stood stock still. Others did the same, excepting one young man who dived into the common hall and brought the whole village pouring out onto the rocky commons. It was a man on the Caliban's shoulders, all shadowy in the twilight, the Caliban itself indistinct against the brush, and a second Caliban, smaller, came after, with a man sitting on that one too. The Calibans stopped. Weirds materialized out of the brush around the camp, shadows in the fading colors of night's edge, some naked and some wearing dull-hued bits of clothes. The man sitting on the Caliban's neck, the first one, lifted his arm. "You'll leave this place." The voice came ringing out at them, a speech from a weird. The voice came ringing out, "You'll leave this place." The voice came ringing out at them, a speech from a weird. And that alone was shock enough, but the Caliban moved forward, light and slow as the clawed feet could set themselves on the stone, and the Hillers gathered on the doorstep of the common hall gave backward like the intaking of a breath. There were hunters among them, but no one had brought weapons to evening meal. There were elders, but no one seemed to know what to say about this. There were children, and one of the youngest started to cry, setting off an infant, but parents hugged their faces against their shoulders and frantically hushed them. Other Calibans were around the camp, some with riders, moving ghost-like through the bush. Brush through the brush. Read! You have eyes. Other Calibans were around the camp, some with riders, moving ghost-like through the brush, and smaller Calibans, like the witless greys. And smaller still, a handful of the village aerials came slithering out into the empty space between Calibans and hall and froze there, heads up, fringes lifted, a thing peculiarly horrid, that creatures the children kept for pets should range themselves with such an invasion. "The village is done," the intruder said. "Time to move. Calibans are coming. Tonight. More and more of them. The times change.
These strangers inside the wires, these strangers that mark you to go through their gates, that take food enough from the town to get fat, they've got everything. And they shoot browns. That doesn't do. No, that doesn't do at all. There's no more time. There's new patterns across the river. There's things no outsider ever saw. There's a safe place I'll bring you to, but this place, this village is going to be for the wind and the aerials tomorrow, like the domes they tell you about, like those, dead and dark. The stone underfoot won't protect you. Not now. "That's Jinn," someone said under his breath, a tone of horror, and the name went whispering through the village. "That's Jinn that was lost on Riverside." "Jinn," a man's voice said, and that was Jinn Older, who pushed his way out in front of everyone with tears and shock in his voice.
Jinn, come down from that. Come here. This is your people, Jinn."
Something hissed. Jinn Older slapped at something in his neck about the time his wife pushed through the crowd to get to him, and other kin. But Jinn Older fell down, and a few tried to see to him, but one broke to run for cover. A second hissing, and that woman staggered and sprawled. "Take what you want," Jinn shouted, pointing a rigid arm at the village about them. "What you'll need, you gather up, but plan to leave. You thought you were safe here, built on rock. But you leave these buildings, you just leave them for the flitters, and be glad. You move now. They won't like waiting." And then, "Move!" he shouted at them, because no one did. And then everyone did, a panicked scattering. In case the gravity of the situation hasn't dawned on you, shit just got real. It's about to get a whole lot realer. Cloud reached his own house, out of breath, and fumbled in the dark, familiar corner for his bow, with only the fireplace coals to see by. He found his quiver on the peg, slung that to his shoulder, and turned about again, facing the door, as a flurry of running steps came up to it, a flood of figures he knew even in the dark. "It's me," he said before they could take fright. His wife Dal, his sister Pia, his grandmother Ellie, and his own son Tam, 8 years old. His wife hugged him. He hugged her one-armed, and he hugged his son and sister too. Tam was crying as he made to go. Ma Ellie put herself in his way. "No," Ellie said. "Cloud, where are you going?" He was afraid at the thought of shooting humans and Calibans, but that was what he was off to, what was about to happen out there, what had already started on the invaders' side. He heard shouting, heard the hiss of Calibans. Then he heard faint screams. "Come back here!" Ma Ellie clenched his shirt, pulled at him with all her might, a stout woman, a woman who had mothered him half his life. "You've got a family to see to here!" "Ma Ellie, if we don't stop them out there together—" "You're not going out there. Come back here. They'll kill you out there, and what good is that?" His wife held him, her arms added to Ma Ellie's, and young Tam held to his waist. They pulled him inside, and he lost his courage, lost all the fire that urged him to go out and die for them, because he was thinking now. "Then what?" Ma Ellie asked, and he had no answer, none. He patted his wife's shoulder, hugged his sister. "All right," he said. "Gather everything," Ma Ellie said, and they started at it in the dark. Young Tam tossed a log on the hearth. "No," Cloud said, and pulled the boy back and raked the log out with a stick before it took light. A scattering of coals. He took the boy by the shoulders and shook him. "No light. Get all the clothes you can find. Here?" The boy nodded, swallowed tears, and went. Cloud looked rightward, where Ma Ellie was down on her knees among the scattered coals, wrestling with the flagstones. He squatted down and levered it up for her with his knife, asked no questions as she pulled up the leather-wrapped books that were the treasure of Ellie's line. She hugged them to her, and he helped her up while the business of packing went on around them.
Not going to live in any Caliban hole,
Ma Ellie muttered. He heard her voice break. He had not heard Ellie Flanahan cry since his mother died.
You hear me, Cloud? We go out that door, we keep going.
Yes, he said. If he had seen no other way, he would have surrendered for his family's sake, for nothing else. But what Ma Ellie wanted suddenly fell into place with all his instincts. Of course that was where they would try to go. Of course that was where they had to try. Only his mind shuddered under the truth it had kept shoving back for the last few moments. The invaders would get the old, the weak, the children. The Calibans would have them, and the darts would strike down those that stood to fight. All that might get away was a family like his, with all its members able to run, even old Ma Ellie. Coward, something said to him, but fool, that something said when he thought of fighting Calibans and darts at night. He took up a bundle of something his wife gave him, and very quietly went to the door and looked out into the commons, where Calibans moved between them and the common hall lights. It was quiet yet. "Come on," he said. "Keep close. Pia, go last."
Yes,
she said, a hunter herself, for all she was 15.
Go on, I'm behind you.
He slipped out, strung his bow, nocked an arrow as he went around the side of the house, toward the slope of the hill. A gray thrashed toward him, sentry in the bushes. He whipped the bow up and fired, one true venomed shot. The gray hissed and whipped in its pain, and he ran down the slope, collected his family again at the bottom, out of breath as they were, and started off again. Out of breath as they were, or as they were? I don't know. The gray hissed and whipped in its pain, and he ran down the slope. Collected his family again at the bottom, out of breath as they were, and started off again, a jog for a time, a walk, and then a mild run, gaining what ground they could, because he heard panic behind them.
Fire,
Pia breathed. He looked back. There was. He saw the glow. Houses were afire.
Keep walking,
Ma Ellie said, a gasp for air.
Keep walking.
A noise broke at their backs, a running, but not of Caliban feet. Cloud aimed an arrow, but it was more of their own coming.
Who are you?
Cloud hissed at them. But the runners just kept running. Of shame, perhaps, or fear. His own family went as fast as it could already, and soon he carried young Tam, and Dal took the books from Ma Ellie, who tottered along at the limit of her strength. He wept. He did not know it until he felt the wind on his face turn the tears cold. He looked back from time to time at the glow which marked the end of what he knew. And if the Calibans would hunt them further, if they had a mind to, he knew nowhere that they were safe. He only hoped they would forget. Calibans did, or seemed to, sometimes. Chapter 17. The Town. The snap of wires, flares in the dark. There was screaming, above all the commotion of people running in the streets. They surged at the gates, at the wire, but the base never saw them.
Open up!
Dean cried, screamed, lost among the others.
Open the gates!
But the base would not. Would never open the gates at all, to let a rabble pour into their neat concrete gardens, come too near their doors, bring their trade-cloth rags and their stink and their terror. Dean knew that before the others believed it. He turned away, ran, panting, crying at once. Stopped in a clear place and looked over his shoulder at Nightmare. at a seam opening in the earth, at houses beginning to fold in upon themselves under the floodlights and collapse in heaps of stone, at the rip growing and tilting the slabs of the paved road, and under the crowd itself, people falling. A renewed screaming rang out. The rift kept traveling. And suddenly, in the dark and the floodlights, a monstrous head thrust up out of the earth. Dean ran, everything abandoned, the way the Calibans themselves had opened, across the ruined fields. Once, at screams, a thin and pitiful screaming from behind, he looked back, and many of the lights had gone out, but such as were left shone on a puff of smoke, a billowing cloud amid the tall concrete buildings of Main Base. And there was a building less than there had been. The Calibans were under the foundations of the base. The base itself was falling. He ran, in terror, ran and ran and ran. He was not the only one to pass the wires, but he stayed for no one, found no companion, no friend, nothing, only drove himself further and further until he could no longer hear the screams. Yeah. I was supposed to show another map. I'll pop it in there in a sec. Yeah, for whatever reason, the map locations in relation to the rest of the text are kind of off, or have gotten more off. I assume that's an edition issue, where they're showing up where they're supposed to show up in like a solo edition of the book that isn't a combined edition, and so they're slightly off here. It's not too bad, I just wish I'd remembered. In fact, I'll get it in now, even though it's too late. Give me 1 sec. Let me add it to the rotation. We're looking for the one after 397. I think that's it. Alrighty, so what we've got here is Styx and Cloud Rivers in CR 90. Actually, no, maybe that's what we're supposed to do. Whatever, it's coming up. We're fine. Chapter 18. I have the mic turned away from me. That is not helpful. In the hills. They found him in the morning, among the rocks, and Cloud raised his bow, an arrow aimed across the narrow stream, because everything had become an enemy. But the townsman, wedged with his back to the rocks, only lifted his hand as if that could stop a flint-headed arrow, and stared at them so bleakly, so wearily, that Cloud lowered the bow and put the arrow away. "Who are you?" Cloud asked when they squatted across the narrow stream from each other, while his sister Pia and his wife and son tended Ma Ellie, bathing her face and holding water for her to drink. "What name?" "Name's Dean," the other said, hoarse, crouching there on his side with his arms about his knees and his fine town clothes in rags. "Name's Cloud," Cloud said, and Dal came beside him and handed him some of the food they had just brought, while the stranger sat across the stream just looking at them, not asking. "He's hungry," Pia said. "We give him just a bit." Cloud thought about it, and finally took a morsel of bread and held it out to the townsman on his side. The man unwound himself from his crouch and got up and waded across the stream. He took the bit they offered him and sank down again, and ate the bread very slowly. Tears started from his eyes, ran down his face, but there was never expression on it, never a real focus to his eyes. "You come from town," Ma Ellie said. "Town's gone," he said.
There was none of them could think of what to say then. Town had always been rich and powerful. "Base buildings fell," he said. "I saw it." "We go south," Cloud said finally. "They'll hunt us," Pia said. "We go down the coast," Cloud said, thinking through it, where the food was, where they could be sure of fresh water, streams coming to the sea. "South is a big river," said Dean in a quiet voice. "I know." They took the townsmen with them. They found others as they went, some of their own kin, some that were only townsmen who had run far enough and fast enough. Like themselves, those who could run, and those who would run for whatever reason. Others drifted to them, and sometimes Calibans came, but kept their distance. Chapter 19. Message from Gehenna Station to Alliance Headquarters, couriered by A.S. Winifred. Intervention of station-based forces has secured the perimeter of the base. Casualties among base personnel are 14 fatalities and 46 injuries, 9 critical. All personnel except security forces and essential staff have been lifted to the station. Destruction in the town is total. Casualties are undetermined. 20 are confirmed dead, but due to the extensive damage and the hazard of the ground, further search is not presently an option. 202 survivors have reached the aid station set up at the base gate for treatment of injuries, most told of digging themselves free. Under the cover of darkness, Calibans return to the ruin and dig in the rubble. Accompanying tape number 2 shows this activity. The Hiller village also suffered extensive damage, and orbiting survey has seen no sign of life there. The survivors of the town and village have scattered. The station will make food drops, attempting to consolidate the survivors where possible. The station urgently requests exception to the non-interference mandate for humanitarian reasons. The mission recommends lifting the survivors off-world. Chapter 20. Message. Alliance Headquarters Science Bureau to Gehenna Station couriered. To Alliance Headquarters Station...
I'm flagging.
We're almost done what I had set aside. Chapter 20. We'll try it again. Message. Alliance Headquarters Science Bureau to Gehenna Station, couriered by A.S. Phoenix.
With extreme regret and full appreciation of humanitarian concern, the Bureau denies request for lifting of the non-interference mandate under any circumstance. Gehenna Base will be re-established under maximum security with equipment arriving aboard this courier. It is Bureau policy that no interference be permitted in the territory of unconsenting sapients, even in benevolent intention. The station will extend all possible cooperation and courtesy to Bureau Agent K. Florio.
Chapter 21. Actually, before that, let's do the map. So things have changed a bit. The Caliban mounds have shifted in shape. They've extended further along. Gehenna Base and the town around it has... it's not gone entirely, but it's had a bunch of stuff removed. And the Hiller settlement is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Also... there's a big series of Caliban mounds twisting and twirling to the south, which I don't think was there previously. Let me double check here. It was not. So things are moving around, and that's on the Cloud River. Now, let me flip back to where I was. There it is. Let's see. Here's the genealogy chart.
Major update is that Jin 8 is now labeled as Jin 8 who goes into the mounds. Has had a child named Jin 9 who was born in year 90. Cloud 2 has, it lists his child, Pia Flanahan, born in 74, and Cloud 3, who talks to Pia, who was born in 62. Pia Flanahan is married to Dean, who was born in 62. They've had a child named Ellie, who was born in 90. Cloud 3 married Dal. Dal was born in 61, so they're just a year apart. And they gave birth to a child named Clouds Tam, who was born in 81. I think those are the biggies. Most everybody is still kicking, though, at least on the Jin family genealogy. Chapter 21, Year 90, Day 144, Colony Reckoning. Staff meeting, Gehenna Station. Give me a sec, I'm getting a love note message that I have to respond to. Hello? Of course. Something died. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Oh, it really helps if you actually look at the right audio monitor. Oh, that's mortifying. I'm so sorry. Lordy. So, Chapter 21.
Year 90. Day 144, Colony Reckoning. Staff meeting, Gehenna Station. It is a tragedy, Florio said, making a fortress of his hands in front of him. He spoke quietly, eyed them all. But those who disagree with policy have their options to be transferred. There was silence from the rest of the table, poses like his own, grim faces, male and female. Old hands at Gehenna Station, seniority considerable. We understand the rationale, the director said. The reality is a little difficult to take. Are they dying? Florio asked softly. No. The loss of life is done. The human population has stabilized. They're surviving very efficiently down there. He moved his hands and sorted through the survey reports. If I lacked evidence to support the Bureau decision, it's here. The world is put through turmoil, and still two communities reassert themselves. One is well situated for observation from the base. Both are surviving thanks to the food drops. The Bureau will sanction that much through the winter to maintain a viable population base. The final drop will be seed and tools. After that... And those that come to the wire, have you been letting them in? We've been delivering health care and food. Florio frowned, sorted through the papers. The natives brought up here for critical treatment haven't adjusted to station life. Severe psychological upset. It's that humanitarian. I think it should be clear that good intentions have led to this disaster. Good intentions. I will tell you how it will be. The mission may observe without interference. There will be no program for acculturation. None. No firearms will be permitted on world. No technological materials may be taken outside the base perimeter except recording instruments. There was silence from the staff. There is study to be pursued here, Florio said, more softly still. The Bureau has met immeasurable intelligences. It has never met an immeasurable one. Oh, the Bureau has met measurable intelligences. It has never met an immeasurable one. It has never met a situation in which humanity is outcompeted by an adaptive species which may violate the criteria. The Bureau puts a priority on this study. The tragedy of Gehenna is not inconsiderable, but it is a double tragedy, most indubitably a tragedy in terms of human lives. For the Calibans, very possibly a tragedy. Rights are in question, the rights of sapients to order their affairs under their own law, and this includes the human inhabitants, who are not directly under Alliance laws. Yes, it is an ethical question. I agree. The Bureau agrees. But it extends that ethical question to ask whether law itself is not a universal concept. Humans and Calibans may be in communication. We are very late being apprised of that possibility. Policy would have been different had we known. If there were any question whether humans were adapted to Gehenna, that would have to be considered. That humans may have drifted into communication with a species the behaviors of which 20 years of technologically sophisticated research and trained observation has not understood. This in itself ought to make us question our conclusions. Any question of sapience, in any definition of sapience, where do we put this communication? Suppose, only suppose, that humans venture into further space and meet something else that doesn't fit our definitions. How are we to deal with it? What if it's spacefaring and armed? The Bureau views Gehenna as a very valuable study. Somehow we have to talk to a human who talks to Calibans. Somehow what we have here has to be incorporated into the Alliance. Not disbanded, not disassembled, not re-educated. Incorporated. At the cost of lives. Oh, at the cost of lives. The objection came from down the table, far down the table. From security. Florio met the stare levelly, assured of power. This world is on its own. We tell it nothing. We give it nothing. Not an invention, not a shred of cloth. No trade goods. Nothing. The station will get its supplies from space, not from Gehenna. Lives, the man said. A closed world, Florio said, gains and loses lives by its own rules. We don't impose them. By next year, all aid will have been withdrawn. Food, tools, everything, including medical assistance. Everything. There was silence after. No one had anything to say. Chapter 22. Year 90, Day 203, Colony Reckoning. Clouds Settlement. The Calibans came to the huts, and they made on the new river. The Calibans came to the huts they made on the new river in the south, and brought terror with them. But the shelters stood. There was no undermining. The Greys arrived first, and then a tentative few Browns burrowing up along the stream. And more, and more. They fired no arrows, but huddled in their huts and tried not to hear the Calibans move at night, building walls about them, closing them about, making patterns of which they were the heart. Calibans spared the gardens they had made. It was the village they haunted, and even by day Ariels and Greys sat beneath the sun.
"They have come to us," said Ellie, "the way they came to Jinn."
"We have to stay here," said an old man. "They won't let us go." It was true. They had their gardens. There was nowhere else to go. Chapter 23. Settlement on Clouds River. "They came from a place called Cytine," Dean said, by the hearth where the only light was in their common shelter. Dean said, by the hearth where the only light was in their common shelter, and the light shone on faces young and old who gathered to listen. He had the light, but he told it by heart now, over and over, explaining it to children, to adults, to townsmen and hillers who had never seen the inside of modern buildings, who had to be told so many things. Ma Ellie and her folk sat nearest, Cloud with that habitual frown on his face, and Dal listening soberly, and Pia and young Tam solemn as the oldest. 20 gathered here, crowded in, and there were others, too many to get into the shelter at once, who would come in their turn. They came because he could read the books more than Ellie herself. He could tell what was in them in ways the least could understand. He could tell what was in them in ways the least could understand. Cloud valued him. Pia came to his bed and called him my Dean, in a way proud and possessive at once. In a way, it was the happiest period of his life. They cared for him and respected him. They listened to what he had to say and took his advice. They gave him a tentative love, and they set him in a kind of special category, excepting Pia, who made him very special indeed, and Cloud and Dal, who adopted him, and Ma Ellie, who talked about the past with him, and Tam, who wanted stories. At times the village seemed all, as if the other had never been. But he read more than he could say. He interpreted. It was all he could do. He was alone in what he understood, and he understood things that tended to make him bitter, written in the hands of long-dead men who had seen the world as strangers. He could go to the wire again. They might take him back. But the bitterness stood in the way. The books were his revenge, his private understanding. Only sometimes, like tonight, when Calibans moved and shifted in the village, when he thought of the mounds which crept tighter and tighter about their lives, he was afraid. And that is where we will call it. For this day. How long is this thing? 580 pages? Somewhere? 600 pages, okay. So I've got to divvy up that in half, roughly. Oh, geez, I might have to split that into 3. That's going to be a dozy, all right. That's going to be a dozy. What about there-ish? The first point in that date line. Oh my god, so many memos, so little time. Okay, that's probably good. Right there. Okay. Plop. Alrighty, so yeah, that's where we'll call it. Oh, I forgot to turn off the recorder part. Very smooth. Anyway, sorry about the awkward break there earlier. Minor crisis I had to briefly deal with. Yeah, probably 3 more installments at a guess. They'll be shorter than this one by a bit. We'll see. There was more book left than I thought. So yeah, moving right along, dramatic events occurring in the world of these people here, and the Alliance Bureau, science or colonization or whatever, basically saying, hands off, no touch. And when we resume next week, we will have jumped forward almost 90 years. So things will be, the maps will be a bit different, let's say. Not as different as you might think, but pretty different. Some pretty interesting features. I love the having the map of the area there over time is a really brilliant touch. Really, really clever. Really gives you an additional perspective of, okay, this is how things have radically shifted. And we'll see how radically they shift indeed next week. Other than that, this Friday we'll be doing more of the Ascension Fact Core. The Ascension Factor by Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom. Things should be moving along there too. Yep. And then next Monday we'll be doing more of Full Metal Panic Book 5. That's the plan. We will stick to the plan. Slightly longer term plan. I don't know what we'll be doing for Wednesdays. We might move right in on Cytine just to get the project moving forward. I thought I had something else I wanted to read in between, but I can't remember what it was. So I guess we'll just go for it. That's going to be a lengthy undertaking. That might take the rest of the year. That book is long. Is long book. Very long. Will take while to read. Good fun. Great drama / political thriller. also takes place over a fairly long time frame, but not this long. This one is like 200 years long. Citeen is not that long. It's only over like the course of roughly a human lifetime, give or take. Actually, a bit less. Half a human lifetime, sort of. Part of one. It does take place over time, though. Intricately chronicled. After we get done with the Ascension Factor, we'll be moving on to The Nightland by William Hope Hodgson, by popular demand and request. And it was either Derpy Shark or a Cookie who asked for it, and I cannot for the life of me remember who, and I apologize. It was one of yous, those. I don't know which ones, but it was one of yous. After we get done with Full Metal Panic Book 5, we'll move on to Book 6, because that's in the same collected edition volume that I have. After that, I don't know. Hopefully by then I will have read the rest of the Zeta Gundam novelization, so we can get on that. If I haven't, then we'll do... because I've only read 1.5 out of 5 or 4 sub-books within the Zeta Gundam novelization. Each one is very short. They're like novellas. They're like 150 pages at most, give or take. If I haven't finished that by then we'll do Book 1 of Legend of the Galactic Heroes, and then do Zeta Gundam. That's fine. Some notes on the Zeta Gundam novelization. It does not take place after the original Mobile Suit Gundam novelization. It takes place after the Mobile Suit Gundam TV series. So it's... one of its big practical upshots is providing a lot of extra context and background detail to the events of Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, which is rather helpful, I find. Considering there's a lot that happens there that is kind of like blink and you'll miss it. As would become a pattern with Tamino. He kind of respects the audience in that way. I give him credit for that. But it can be somewhat frustrating when you're like, wait a minute, how did we get here? And you can't actually remember how we got here. Anyway, next week we'll have more to read. See you all then. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other. Until next time, toodaloo. And